Elsewhere, a lot of showers occurring, some heavy downpours with hail possible across central and southern parts of England. But in between, some sunny spells, and it's another warm afternoon with temperatures reaching 16, possibly even 17 Celsius in some central and northeastern parts. The showers continue for a time on Friday evening, and actually there'll be some longer spells of rain across parts of western Scotland into northern Scotland later as well. But it's another mild night, and so on Saturday we start off with that mild air. A lot of cloud again on Saturday with spells of rain, especially in the north. Drier on Sunday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, you're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Thursday lunchtime, the guru of growth or the sick man of Europe. The verdict's in on Jeremy Hunt and his budget, and it's not all good news for the Chancellor. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility runs its slide rule over the figures, saying the government's been gaming the economy. The overall tax burden now to rise to the highest level since World War II. Labour says there's been a massive bung to pension millionaires, with nothing for striking public sector workers. But the Chancellor says the strength of the economy is proving all the doubters wrong. We're getting reaction and expert analysis from across the country as we continue to crunch the numbers. Meanwhile, those strikes continue. The RMT rail members, teachers and university staff all taking industrial action in their continuing disputes over pay and conditions. It follows one of the biggest single days of strike action in a decade, so our reporters are out and about getting the latest for you. And a ticking, talking time bomb. The enormously popular app expected to be banned from government phones, with the Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden expected to make an announcement this afternoon. How serious is the Chinese spying threat? But let's get an update now on all the headlines with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the impact of the government's new childcare subsidy on the labour market is highly uncertain. It's after the Chancellor announced children over 9 months would be entitled to 30 hours of free care a week. The independent group also said that scrapping the pension's lifetime allowance was unlikely to play a big part in increasing the workforce, but warned it would be expensive. Labour has pledged to reverse the pension plans, saying it will only help the richest 1%. But Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, says it will tackle early retirement within the NHS.
The driver for this policy was what the BMA wanted for consultants, senior doctors who across the country are deciding not to stay for perhaps the last 10 years of their working life. We need those people to make that decision to continue to work in the NHS right now, given the backlogs. If we could have done it quickly, which is very doubtful, for just one profession, would have then launched legal challenges.
Health unions representing nurses and ambulance workers in England are close to resolving an ongoing pay dispute with the government. The proposed deal is expected to include a one-off payment for the current financial year. The government is also expected to increase a previously suggested rise of 3.5% for the next financial year from April. Commuters are facing another round of rail strikes today as the members of the RMT union walk out in a long-running dispute over pay. Passengers are being warned to expect disruption as 3 in 5 services across the UK are cancelled. Further strike action is planned for the 30th of March and the 1st of April. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says the pay offer of a 5% rise for last year and a further 4% rise this year equates to a real terms pay cut.
All of those pay increases, such as they are, which are amount to pay cuts, have got to be funded by changes to our members' working conditions. So it's a self-funded pay rise, really, and that's very difficult for us because the conditions they're putting on that deal are just not acceptable to our people. So we're stuck in a deadlock, really, where the offer is underfunded, the conditions are not acceptable, and we haven't got a way forward.
The London Stock Exchange has rebounded after yesterday suffering its worst losses since the start of the COVID pandemic. Yesterday, the FTSE 100 closed down more than 292 points as a worldwide banking stocks went into freefall. Credit Suisse will borrow up to £45 billion from Switzerland's central bank in an emergency loan after shares in the firm dropped by more than a quarter. It's after it found weakness in its financial reporting, leading to uncertainty within the markets. A 400-year-old hotel which was housing Ukrainian refugees has been engulfed by a fire in West Sussex. The fire broke out after midnight at a neighbouring property before spreading to the roof of the Angel Inn. West Sussex Fire and Rescue Services described the blaze as significant, with 14 fire engines responding to the incident. Over 30 people have been rescued and no casualties were reported. The Pentagon has released video footage of the moment a Russian fighter jet almost collided with a US drone over the Black Sea earlier this week. The declassified video shows the Russian plane approaching the unmanned drone. It dumped fuel nearby, which damaged a propeller. Russia has denied accusations that its jet acted recklessly in the incident, which happened on Tuesday. The Foreign Secretary has pledged to protect Moldova against Russian attacks with an extra £10 million of funding. On a visit to the region, James Cleverly said the funding aims to boost the country's resilience against so-called Russian malign interference. The UK is already contributing to anti-corruption in the country. It's after the Kremlin has been accused of trying to increase its control in the region. Sir Richard Branson's space rocket firm Virgin Orbit is pausing all operations amid financial concerns. It's understood the company is to furlough all of its employees, and the chief executive, Dan Hart, told the staff the move is intended to buy the company time to finalise a new investment plan. Last month, it tried but failed to launch 9 satellites into the Earth's orbit from Newquay in Cornwall. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. So that budget delivered in the space of 55 minutes by Jeremy Hunt. But 24 hours later, the calculations still being made as to whether we are better or worse off. Well, the Chancellor has insisted the budget for growth will get young parents and over 50s back to work. But the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility says the government has been gaming the economy and that the overall tax burden will be the highest now since the Second World War at 37.3% of GDP. Let's get the latest now at Westminster and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, because, Darren, clearly the worry was that the Tory backbenchers would cut up rough if they thought this was not a tax-cutting budget. It seems to be overall a tax-raising budget.
Yeah, indeed. We're still looking at the highest proportion of tax compared to GDP that this country has seen for a hell of a long time. Since really at the end of the Second World War. And on that point, yeah, there are, of course, those voices, those noises on the Conservative right who are not terribly happy about that. They argue that a Conservative government should be cutting taxes, not having them at record levels. Now, the government will defend all of that, won't they, in saying that we've been through some extraordinary times, not least of all a pandemic that cost a hell of a lot of money, and that it is better to pay down this debt rather than saddle future generations with it. But we've just had an assessment from the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which, you know, is a well-respected think tank here in Westminster, that's looking at effectively the number of people having to also pay income tax and the personal level of tax, so aside from the wider economy, but on an individual basis. And they suggest that 1.2 million people will be paying higher rates of tax than they otherwise would have done. And that is for your average taxpayer around 500 quid a year. If you're a top earner, around £1,000 a year. Now, why is that? It's because the tax thresholds essentially have been frozen, so lots more people have been dragged into higher levels of taxation than they otherwise would have done if they'd been linked to inflation. And the other consequence, of course, of that is that it has an impact on the cost of living, because lots of people focus, of course, on interest rates. They focus on the rising costs of goods, whether that be fuel or the supermarket shop. But also what has hammered many people across the country is the fact that they are also paying higher personal taxes. And that means the squeeze, in some ways, is only going to get worse from next month when those tax drag, if you like, comes into place for millions of workers up and down the country.
Yeah, they call it fiscal drag. A lot of people saying it's just a big drag to have to go through this all the time. So how is the Chancellor and the Treasury officials now trying to massage this, especially in the tea rooms behind you there in the Commons? I mean, is the indication perhaps that there will be more of a giveaway in the next budget ahead of course, a general election?
Yeah, I think there's two things politically here at play. First of all, the Conservatives had a pretty good period in office. In fact, one MP put it to me yesterday, Mark, that they couldn't remember 3 weeks that had gone so well for the Conservative Party. It had been so long in the distance past, you know, whether it was the Windsor framework, whether it was getting that bank rescued, whether it was the migration plan and the deal with Emmanuel Macron. And they think that the budget, you know, not going to change the world, has not spooked the markets, at least. I mean, it's a pretty low bar, but it's where we're at, and Britain's going to avoid a technical recession. So I think in all, the kind of opposition is pretty muted in all of this. But yes, you're also right in saying there is an expectation that there will be one more budget before the general election, and that will be the kind of giveaway budget, if you like. That will be when the sweeties are handed out to people up and down the country.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we're in the sense of seeing a wide-scale rebellion about this. Yes, there'll be problems, I think, with some of this, not least of all tax burden, but on the whole, most Conservative backbenchers seem pretty happy that yesterday seems to have gone relatively well.
And in terms of the opposition, then Labour, it seems they're going to go on this, as they call it, pensions bung for the millionaires in terms of the lifetime allowance being scrapped. I mean, is that being seen perhaps by some of the Tories as well as a bit naive?
Yeah, indeed. One Red Wall MP, Conservative MP, said yesterday, you know, there's no one in my constituency who can afford to put 60 grand a year into their pension pot. I mean, we are talking about a very, very small percentage of the population. And actually, when you take that with some of the childcare plans and indeed the sticks, if you like, against those who maybe are struggling to find work, though the government will point there are over 1 million job vacancies, this is definitely a budget that primarily delivers for the middle class, for those wealthier in society, not least of all on that pensions plan. Now, the government would argue this is largely based on GPs. It's about trying to keep many general practitioners in their jobs to stop them from retiring early. And my word, doesn't the country need GPs at the moment? It's something that must be said. Labour, at least a couple of months ago, initially supported if it was confined to GPs. Now, clearly that's not the case because this is a plan across the board for the government. But yes, I think they're going to have to bat away those questions about whether this budget is primarily focused on those who are better off at the expense of those who are worse off, not least of all some public sector workers who've gone on strike. Because that pension plan really, really does apply to very, very few people at the top end of the income scale. Jeremy Hunt, though, as I say, trying to justify that today by saying it's all about trying to retain doctors in the National Health Service at a time, as I say, when people could do with it, given the waiting lists that many people are facing.
Darren at Westminster, thank you very much indeed for that. More reaction, of course, as it comes through. But let's reflect the Chancellor's plans to revitalise the economy by boosting investment and therefore encouraging growth have been met with, well, pretty mixed reviews from businesses themselves across the UK. The National Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses saying firms and operators would feel short-changed. Our economics and business reporter, editor Liam Halligan in Doncaster with an FSB development manager for more on the impact and what it will do for small businesses. And Liam, in terms of being shortchanged or just not having any change at all, have they done their sums there?
Good to be with you, Mark. I am in Doncaster in South Yorkshire. I'm at the site of what was Doncaster Airport. It closed in October. This long-established airport, it sent flights across the Atlantic to the US, to the European mainland, a large local employer, over 1 million passengers a year prior to COVID lockdown. It's been closed. There's a big campaign to get this airport reopened. I'm up here investigating that as well as getting reaction to the budget. And talking about reaction to that budget, I'm delighted to be joined, as you say, by Paula Goldthorpe. She is the area manager for the Federation of Small Businesses here in South Yorkshire and Humber. Paula, great to have you with us here on GB News. Now, FSB, you're a very powerful lobby group. You represent literally tens of thousands of small businesses, the small businesses that keep the British economy moving. Half of all our growth, 3/4 of our employment. How was this budget for the FSB?
Well, I think today is grey. It's a gloomy day, and I think that's reflective of the mood that we are feeling across our small business community. 5.5 million small businesses, 16 million employees that unfortunately have been overlooked with this budget. I think there's a lot there for big businesses. We've seen household sort of extension of the energy support for sort of 3 months, albeit there's no sort of additional payments with that. But actually nothing for small businesses. We know that they're really still struggling with energy. 4 times increase in terms of the energy costs from the 1st of April for lots of businesses. We're here in South Yorkshire. We've got a strong manufacturing base here. A lot of them are going to be affected from the 1st of April with their energy costs. Still lots of costs in terms of supply chain and other sort of increases in terms of materials and other things as well.
And of course, the real headline for you, for the business community, including a lot of small businesses that pay corporation tax, is that we've just had confirmed yesterday the first increase in corporation tax for almost 50 years in this country, a 6 percentage point increase from 19 to 25%. That's got to hurt, particularly small businesses.
Yeah, it's going to hurt. It's a real disappointment. Again, more impact on our business community, more impact for small businesses, and actually there's no incentive there now to grow, to invest. We're already hearing from a lot of our businesses who have the opportunity to grow, to maybe take on more employees, to change, to move premises and get bigger places and do more on innovation. They're holding back because they're so uncertain of the future. They're not sort of sure about what's going on with energy going forward, and other costs sort of globally. So
one concern I have, Paula, is that while the Chancellor did confirm that increase in the corporation tax, he said that was offset because there's full expensing for investment. In other words, businesses can offset part of their investment costs from their corporation tax bill. It strikes me that it's the big businesses, those with deep pockets, those that can raise finance in this current difficult environment, that are more likely to take advantage of those investment incentives. Small businesses like the ones that you represent, not so much.
That's right. Big businesses, I think, will really benefit from this in terms of that taxation, but also in terms of some of the investment. So obviously we've seen announcements for investment zones. Great for South Yorkshire. It's one of those identified. The government talks about everywhere in terms of their proposals. It's not necessarily everywhere. At the moment, it is the fact that you've been invited and there is an opportunity to put a proposal in for an investment zone. But we think that that is going to benefit big businesses, perhaps also businesses that are moving into the area rather than those small businesses that are actually already here, that really need much needed support, and they need support now, not in 2 to 3 years' time when these things are put into place.
Now, we are here at the site of Doncaster Airport. I say the site of the airport because it is a working airport no longer. We're as near as we can get to the airport. It's very much fenced off and mothballed. There was a huge vision here, not just for a passenger airport, over 1 million passengers in 2019, but for a major freight hub. We're an hour and a half on the train from London. We're equidistant, if you like, between Manchester and the East Midlands. This really could have been a big part of the local economy, the local community, and yet it's closed. How much of a blow was that?
A major blow, and many of you will have seen that we've signed a letter to the government to kind of ask about keeping it open, keeping the airspace open whilst options are still being considered. Such a major blow for the area, for regeneration, for levelling up. You know, we're supposed to be levelling up the north, not kind of closing it down. You know, we really want to see that continue. The fight's not over. You know, ourselves and other business support community are really working together to kind of put that message across. We want it to stay open. We want that to keep going for transport, freight, logistics, and all of the wonderful things it does for the community here in Doncaster and Sheffield.
It really is striking, Paula. We're surrounded by hotels, bars, all kinds of places that would once have been full of economic activity, now very much on their uppers. Paula Goldthorpe from the Federation of Small Businesses here in South Yorkshire in the Humber. Thanks so much for joining us here on GB News. The fight does go on here, Mark. As you heard there from Paula, not only is the FSB not particularly impressed with this budget, they're not impressed that this airport's closed. I'm going to be talking to lots more people here on GB News today about this airport closure, whether or not it can be reversed. Feeling here locally is running high. I'll be putting together a special GB News report that I'll bring you early next week.
Excellent. And obviously we'll follow that story on as well, Liam, and the importance it has for the local economy in terms of stimulating growth. For the moment, in that cold and windy grey Doncaster, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's head from Doncaster to Cheltenham, because today, the penultimate day of the festival. Big numbers involved. Just learning that Tony Bloom, owner of Brighton and Hove Albion, with his horse yesterday, won a bet of £830,000, the biggest ever at Cheltenham, but even bigger numbers. We're going to welcome a man now making his debut as a jockey, the world's tallest jockey indeed, at 6'4". Welcome to Jack Andrews. Jack, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I think you're going to be competing against your sister as well a bit later today at Cheltenham. And she's only 5'7". You've got a bit of a head on her.
Yeah, she's. I've ridden against Gina quite a bit, and my other sister Bridget. But that'd be nice to both be lining up today.
OK, and obviously you're, I think, competing in the Challenge Amateur Jockey Handicap chase. You'll be up against guys that will be, well, a foot or more shorter from you, and I guess lighter as well. That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose that's the main aspect of being tall, is that from a riding point of view, it's not a disadvantage, but it's the day-to-day struggle with your weight, and obviously being shorter, your natural weight's going to be lighter. So no, that's the main struggle with being taller, really.
And also because I gather you've let slip when you've been talking to the newspapers, you're rather partial to chocolate hobnob as well, which might not help.
No, I suppose you have to have some sort of a treat every now and then. And yeah, I suppose.
Okay, well, are you going to be able to treat yourself today? What are your chances of winning, do you think?
I think she's got a good chance. She's a mare that I won on in November at Cheltenham before Christmas there, and she's hasn't ran since and has been trained for this day by Ben Pauling. So no, I'd be very hopeful. Okay, and are you allowed to have a flutter on yourself in these circumstances? No, definitely not. You're not allowed to back yourself, really. It's very much. And in terms of your riding style, because you are so tall, I mean, one got visions of maybe your feet, being on the floor on the back of the horse. Do you have to change that compared to the other jockeys? I suppose it's something that I've had to work on over the years to make myself neater and tidier. Obviously, for shorter guys, it's a little bit easier, and it's something I try and pride myself on is trying to be neat and tidy and not look tall on a horse if that's possible. Yeah. And obviously don't hit anything on the way over the jumps if you're going over the jumps at any stage. But we wish you well, and we wish Gina as well. No sort of sister brotherly rivalry going on. I hope. But we will be back in touch with you and see how you've got on there at Cheltenham. But thanks for joining us, because I know you've got a busy day ahead. Thanks very much indeed. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll be live to Cheltenham a little later as well to catch up on all the latest. As we said, that bet of £830,000. But, of course, you might not win quite as much on Jack if he romps home later. You're watching GB News Live. Coming up, the latest on the rail strikes sweeping the country once more. Is there any hope of a breakthrough? Updating on that shortly.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A grey, damp and breezy day today for many of us, but it is much milder for the vast majority compared with recent days. We've got a number of weather fronts moving through. We've already seen a warm front move through. That's brought the milder air from the southwest with it. Tightly packed isobars, gusty winds and a cold front pushing in from the afternoon with some spells of rain on it, initially affecting northern and western England, parts of Wales, as well as much as Scotland. A damp afternoon to come here with gusty winds as well. Some brighter skies ahead of that front for East Anglia and the southeast, and brighter skies as it clears Northern Ireland, although as temperatures rise to 15 or even 16 Celsius here, we could see some sharp showers or even a few rumbles of thunder into the afternoon and evening. And those showers will spread into central and southern Scotland during the evening as well, so some hefty downpours. But across central and southern parts of England, we've got spells of rain as the cold front slows down. The rain easing for a time during the early hours, but a lot of cloud about, and with the cloud and that air coming from the south and southwest, it is going to be a mild night away from the far north. Low single figures for Shetland, but otherwise for the vast majority mid to high single figures. Rainfall returns across southern and southeast England as we begin Friday, an area of rain clearing slowly through the morning. Elsewhere, a lot of showers occurring, some heavy downpours with hail possible across central and southern parts of England, but in between, some sunny spells, and it's another warm afternoon with temperatures reaching 16, possibly even 17 Celsius in some central and northeastern parts. The showers continue for a time on Friday evening, and actually there'll be some longer spells of rain across parts of western Scotland into northern Scotland later as well. But it's another mild night, and so on Saturday we start off with that mild air. A lot of cloud again on Saturday with spells of rain, especially in the north. Drier on Sunday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Let's update you on the strike's timetable because, yes, it is rail services being hit today. The latest on the trains, 3 in 5 services being cancelled today and the latest wave of industrial action spreading across the country. Members of the RMT union at 14 train operating companies taking action today in their long-running row over pay, jobs and, of course, conditions. Let's cross to Birmingham New Street Station and get the latest with our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson. Jack, some trains running, but clearly people having to sort of juggle their arrangements to get from A to B.
Yes, so around 40 to 50% of the network is currently running today, so significantly less trains running across the country than we usually see. A notable absence from Network Rail striking today. Of course, they suspended their strikes after the RMT and Network Rail agreed to put their pay offer to their members in a ballot, which is going to close on Monday. So we might see an end to the disruption between the RMT and Network Rail, but certainly between the other 14 rail and train operating companies, that we're certainly seeing this action continue. You can see over my shoulder the Avanti West Coast train line, picket line that's here today. There's 2 others around Grand Central Station here in Birmingham today, and for many commuters there's only really 1 train per hour running across each of the different lines, and so passengers have had to find alternative arrangements. It's not as possibly catastrophic as what it could have been here in Birmingham certainly today. National Express, the bus company here, was set to go on strike with all of the bus routes cancelled, but they entered into pay negotiations earlier this week, and so for people here certainly in the city, they've been able to find alternative arrangements to commute. But what is the public support like for these strikes? We know how long they've continued on over the past months. I've spoken to a few people today to find out what they think.
It's affecting hard-working people. People want money. People want money to live in times that are hard, cost of living, petrol, food, energy. They deserve money like everybody else wants a decent wage to survive.
They're very inconvenient for me who's got the train today, but I absolutely understand why people are fighting for what they believe in.
It's just an inconvenience to the whole public, isn't it? But I don't think the trains have been any good ever since they were privatised, so I don't think I've seen anything improved by privatising it whatsoever. We're paying through the nose for that service, and it's next to useless.
Well, back to you, Jack, in a moment. I'm just going to interrupt you. We're taking you to the Commons. Oliver Dowden
between
the and we're about to, I think, get an announcement on this government ban on TikTok being used on government phones. Let's go straight to the
non-ministerial departments, but it will not extend to personal devices for government employees or ministers or the general public. That is because, as I have outlined, this is a proportionate move based on a specific risk with government devices. However, as is always the case, we do advise individuals to practice caution online and to consider each social media platform's data policies before downloading and using them. And of course, it is the case that ministers receive regular security briefings and advice on protecting data on their personal devices and on mitigating cyber threats. We will also be putting in place specific, very limited exemptions for the use of TikTok on government devices where it is required for operational reasons. Those exemptions will only be granted by security teams on a case-by-case basis, with ministerial clearance provided as appropriate. Overall, this approach aligns with action taken by allies, including the United States, Canada, and the EU. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our security must always come first. And today we are strengthening that security in a prudent and proportionate way. And I commend this statement to the House.
And Lorena.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the statement today, and then can I also thank the Minister for advance sight of the statement. But once again, the government is late to the game. In August last year, Parliament closed its TikTok account, and as the Minister just said, in December the US banned TikTok from official devices, and nearly a month ago the European Commission followed suit. But on the 28th of February, the Secretary of State for Science and Innovation said the app was a matter of personal choice. She said that we have no evidence and a ban would be very forthright. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what's changed? 2 weeks, 2 ministers, 2 completely different policies later, and it's the same pattern over and over again. A government behind the curve with sticking plaster solutions, forced to lurch into a U-turn at the last minute. And we need a strong and clear-eyed, consistent approach. One that ensures that we can protect our national security and put us in a strong position to engage with states such as China, where it's in our interest to do so, such as in areas like climate change and trade. Mr. Deputy Speaker, he announced a restriction on the official devices to a pre-approved list of third-party apps and a ban on TikTok. How does the ban on TikTok differ from it simply not being on that approved list? And why is it limited only to central government departments? And how will it apply, for example, to devolved governments or parliaments? And can the MOD, for example, keep their account? He said the TikTok ban is based on a specific risk with government devices. Can he also go a little bit further on this, Mr. Deputy Speaker? What exactly is the specific risk, and why does it apply only to official devices in central government? And can the Chancellor tell us what advice has been issued to other ministers, including those already actively using TikTok? And what criteria will be used for the list of pre-approval apps he has announced here today, which will be included and which will not, and on what grounds? Today's announcement, Mr. Deputy Speaker, feels like a closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. If the Minister was serious about overhauling security at the heart of government, why was this review limited only to the use of third-party apps on government devices? Why not a root and branch review of technology used by his colleagues? Because the reality is, this government's track record on upholding security at the heart of government is appalling, from their chronic use of private emails to the former Foreign Secretary's phones being hacked. And can he say if there were any discussions during this process about the use of private messaging such as WhatsApp and email by ministers? And can he also confirm what will be a priority to make good on promises to upgrade the guidance about the use of private emails by ministers, which is now a decade old? And during the procurement bill, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee described the government's approach to tracking down security threats in our supply chain as relentless whack-a-mole. She said we needed a more systematic approach and proactive approach to identifying risks in the UK supply chain, especially when it comes to goods and services bought with taxpayers' money. I agree with her, Mr Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister? And if the Minister is truly serious about national security at the heart of government, why did he vote against Labour's amendments to the procurement bill to mandate that suppliers who pose a risk to UK's national security must be excluded from being granted taxpayers' money? Mr Deputy Speaker, the government has a duty to uphold the highest standards of security at the heart of government. This announcement today is nothing but a temporary fix, a sticking plaster, while gaping holes still remain in our national security. We must fix this problem. Is the Minister committed to doing this?
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question. She raised a large number of issues. I'll try and address as many as I can. I'm happy to write to her on any that I haven't covered off. First of all, the overall approach that the government is taking to national security is set out in the Integrated Review Refresh, which was published at the beginning of this week. Specifically in respect of China, it sets out a three-pronged approach of protect, align and engage, and this element of our activity clearly relates to protect. She asks about why this decision has taken some time. We have always been taking an evidence-based approach, and I thought it was appropriate that we gather the sufficient evidence and understand the nature of the problem. That's something that I did in November. I think that that's an appropriate way in which to deal with national security challenges, and one that I will continue to take. She asks about the limited list. It is the case already that we have an approved list of apps. That doesn't apply to every government department. What we're doing now is ensuring that applies across all government departments. So I don't believe that there is a risk extant at the moment. This is about ensuring that we continue to guard against the risk on an ongoing basis. The ban doesn't just apply to central government departments, it applies to all government agencies, including arm's-length bodies. In respect of the devolved administrations, I have written to the leaders in both Scotland, Wales and the appropriate officials in Northern Ireland in respect of that. In respect of ministers, ministers receive extensive advice when they take office and are expected to follow that in respect of all the devices that they use. In respect of private messaging, we are updating the guidance on non-corporate communications to ensure that we have a consistent approach again across government, but again, I don't believe that we have serious concerns in respect to that. I would just say finally on the sort of, I would gently say to the Right Honourable Lady, a slightly overblown rhetorical point she made about government taking action. I have always been willing to take decisive action to protect national security. It's exactly the approach that I took in respect of banning Huawei from our 5G networks before many of our allies did so. It's exactly the approach that I took within weeks of taking office in respect of government surveillance devices on sensitive sites that have Chinese technology on them. But we must proceed in an evidence-based and proportionate approach. That's what will command public confidence, and that is the approach that I'm taking today.
I'd just like to say that for those who are in their offices who wish to take part
statement from Oliver Dowden, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, confirming that TikTok now to be banned from official phones within the government, all government agencies. He's just replied there to Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner indicating that the government late to the game, as she said, closing the stable door for the horses bolted, because pointing out that Washington and indeed Canada and the EU had already placed the app on, or banned the app on staff phones. But Oliver Dowden clearly saying there that the government's move was evidence-based, he said. No risk extant, but clearly having taken action against Huawei in terms of 5G masts and equipment and surveillance cameras as well, indicating that the government would apply these security matters to all technology and updating guidance, he said, on private messaging as well. So that coming into force now. Let's get some reaction on that in a moment. I'm just going to bring you some breaking news coming in from a court on the sentencing of Layla Borrington, who'd filmed her 3-year-old stepson, Harvey Borrington, as he lay dying from a brain injury. She's been jailed for 15 years at Nottingham Crown Court for manslaughter, assault and causing grievous bodily harm. Yet another upsetting case coming through from court. We'll get more details on that as it comes through. But let's return now to this TikTok story. Just to reaffirm, Oliver Dowden announcing that these government phones now will have the app removed. Let's speak to the details coming through from Oliver Dowden. After, indeed, evidence from the National Cyber Security Centre. That's the basis on which that decision was made. Well, let's speak now to technology journalist Will Guyett, who can join us. Will, thanks very much indeed. Just to pick up on what we were hearing there from Oliver Dowden, clearly this Cyber Security Centre was actually looking at what was going on, but Angela Rayner still pressing him on, what is the problem with it?
Yeah, we haven't seen the evidence yet, and that's the most important thing for me. Until this point, it seemed like Chinese phobia. But if they've got genuine evidence, people...
Will, we've just had an interruption on the signal. I'm not sure if that's to do with Chinese technology or not. We'll try and get a better signal to you. And while we're doing that, let's just reiterate what we've just heard in the Commons on that statement. Of course, Beijing had been accused, or Beijing is accusing the Western governments of spreading disinformation on this. TikTok itself saying it does not share data with the Chinese government. But, of course, Chinese intelligence legislation does require firms to help the Communist Party when required. I think we've got a better connection now with Will. Will, I was just saying, hopefully that's not Chinese technology that is interfering with our signal. However, let's just reflect on what we were talking about, and that is that the Cyber Security Centre was looking at this in some detail.
Yeah, I'd like to see what information they now have. That's the most important thing from where I'm sat. We still don't have any of that information. And the reality is that as a Western society, we are now up to our necks in Chinese technology. The iPhone that's sat in front of me has more Chinese components than any smartphone than ever before. So if there is genuine concern here, let's get the evidence on the table. Because at the moment, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is no different to what Google, Meta, or other tech companies are doing with data. It's no different. Now, if we're concerned about China and the Chinese state, that's valid, but give us some information. Don't just make this look as though, to many of us on the outside looking in, it's pure Chinese phobia about Chinese tech at the moment.
Right. So, I mean, the question would be, is there some kind of gadget-specific listening device that then has the information or recording device going on to the Chinese state directly or indirectly? Or is it just, as with all this technology, as you've indicated, even with your Alexa speaker at home, it can listen in?
Yeah, that's exactly the point here. There is nothing extra or additional that this app is doing in terms of the data it's taking from users and their phones, as opposed to Meta, who own Facebook, or Twitter, owned by Elon Musk. There's very little difference, in fact, none. So if they've got something else which hasn't yet been disclosed, there's something going on behind the scenes that analysts haven't found, that some finer security minds have found, that evidence would be really important for those of us who are making our decisions. And the government still seems to be using TikTok. There are still government ministers on TikTok. 12 months ago, Boris Johnson set up the number 10 TikTok account. So things were clearly fine then. What has changed since? This information is the type of information that always lacks in these government announcements. Oliver Dowden's announcement that 5G equipment's being removed from the Chinese 5G equipment's being removed from the network. He forgot to tell you that it's been delayed delayed because he can't find other countries to supply that kit. That's the issue we face here. There's obviously concerns, and we understand that there are concerns, but they need to be spelled out.
Because Ian Duncan-Smith is now talking in that debate, so we'll just return to the Commons quickly and maybe get your view on what he's saying.
That has their private phone with TikTok in it should remove it, because that gets rid of the risk that we'll have. And I also have an amendment down concerning hike vision cameras. I've never known it so difficult to drag any information out of government about the sites that they're using with these cameras. They should now be removed from every single site that is a government base, and the reality is right now they're all dragging their feet. Could you turn to that as well?
I thank my right honourable friend for his questions. I'll take the second point first. I'm very happy to meet with him and provide further information in respect of the sites where Hikvision is used. I should say that this applies in respect of surveillance technology from Chinese companies. It's not just in respect of Hikvision. The broader point that the right honourable gentleman makes is a legitimate one, and is a balance that the government has to try and get right, because it is the case that many social media apps have huge amounts of data harvesting. And it is also the case.
So Oliver Dowden making the very point that Will has just been making about all other devices and apps. Will, sorry to interrupt you. We just thought we'd get the view there of Ian Duncan-Smith, because, of course, he has campaigned on many issues in terms of China and its intelligence operations. I mean, I guess the main question is, what technology doesn't have some kind of Chinese technology in it nowadays?
Very little. And the question there that he raised about the CCTV, the Hikvision Chinese CCTV systems, it was the government that was recommending that those were installed due to their lower cost. So we've gone from a position of actively encouraging this technology into our networks and our services to very, very quickly deciding it's a bad idea. Now, if that's the case, give us evidence. At the moment, saying that there's a risk or a concern, which the US have done for a while with TikTok, but they've not actually shown any heightened risk of our data being handed over to the Chinese state or any real evidence of that happening. So if they've got evidence, people like me will change our opinion very quickly.
Will, thank you very much indeed for that. And we'll let you go and switch your TikTok app off and check your surveillance cameras as well. Thank you very much indeed. Let's return now to the budget and what it means for drinkers. Of course, good news if you like a pint at the pub, particularly 11p off for beer at the pump. But in terms of wine drinkers and spirits, not so good. Indeed, Mark Kent, Chief Executive of the Scotch Whisky Association, now demanding an urgent meeting with the Chancellor to discuss the impact of those changes, calling for that duty rise to be reversed, saying, with the right support, with the reversal of the tax rise, we are confident the industry can continue to deliver for the UK economy. Even Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack said to have conceded that the rise was not what I wanted for the Scottish industry. But, of course, it is good news, perhaps, for pubs and the beer industry. So let's speak now with Daniel Kenny, owner of Rent a Keg. And, Daniel, the move, obviously, was to make certainly beer at the pub more competitive compared to what you're buying at the supermarkets.
Yeah, so we've already seen a decrease on the wholesale price, which is effectively is helping us, certainly after months and months of constant price rises. So for us, this is quite helpful for the future.
And do you feel that perhaps you've been treated rather more kindly than the spirits industry, as we heard the Scotch whisky industry, and, of course, wine as well? I think about 45 pence per bottle extra duty.
I suppose so, but being in the keg industry, that kind of side of it, we've only really noticed the severe increases in kegs. So whilst it's possible that we might be treated kindly in some respects, but we have had to deal with the constant price increases for the past 18 months. And they've been quite high, you know, seeing prices rise from 40% what they were 18 months ago. And it seems to be every quarter. So we're constantly living in that limbo of a price hike. And it has been changing our market significantly. So it has been an interesting one.
So I guess that 11 pence cut in terms of duty has been more than made up in terms of the rising cost because of hops and gas and all the other delivery costs that have gone up.
It has helped. It will never be back to where it was, but with all the cost increases to be expected. But it's certainly, yes, that cost has cost cut has helped us significantly, and hopefully will do moving forward, as long as we don't see any more increases in 3 months' time.
Well, I was going to ask you about the way forward. I mean, are you sort of, have you tried to absorb as much cost as you can, or extra cost, without putting that back into the sort of charges that you have for renting a keg?
So in terms of what we've done at the moment, we're trying to pass on the savings to our customers, because we already had absorbed the cost and risen the prices to our customers. There's two different facets there. We absorbed the delivery costs and the maintenance costs, but in terms of the actual kegs themselves, we've had to continue to rise prices where we can. However, our margin has ended up being roughly the same. So what we're trying to do is simply pass on the prices back to the customer.
And just in terms of the overall economy, I mean, do you expect perhaps as a result of the budget it may encourage more people to head back out into the industry of going to the pub and having parties and perhaps splashing the cash a bit more?
I would hope so, yes, but it's a difficult one too, because from my perspective, what I see when I'm delivering to these venues is the demand is still there and has been there for a while. So hopefully it will encourage more people to go back and spend more money. I suppose the drop-off that we may have noticed is more in the private sector, so yes to the pubs and the restaurants and things like that, but in terms of the corporate day-to-day business and running of events, that has remained largely the same, if not has increased.
Yeah, because if you're getting married or whatever, you can't break the date. Yeah. Daniel, thank you very much indeed. OK, well, we wish you success, of course, in the months to come. Daniel Kenny, owner of Rent a Keg. Thanks very much indeed. Well, more reaction now, of course, on what people have been making of the budget up and down the country to find out what you have been making of these announcements.
The battered red box. It's the talk of the town as politicians and pundits pick through the bones of Jeremy Hunt's budget bonanza. But away from Westminster, are we talking about the budget too?
We are talking about the budget. It is something that has a massive impact to our business. As a small local independent business, the budget has increased a lot of our prices that we've never had to experience before.
But what have people been telling the People's Channel? 30 hours a week of free childcare has got us talking.
It's great news for parents. It gives them the opportunity to go back to work sooner, which is so important now for all mums and dads in this country to be able to get to work as soon as possible, especially with the living crisis as well, which is a whole other situation.
There may be hidden talents within the mums and dads that are having to stay at home due to the cost of childcare at the moment. Working whilst having to pay for childcare is a massive no-no to a lot of parents.
The Chancellor says he's proving the doubters wrong. We're not in recession, technically at least. And on the streets of Birmingham, relief.
Well, I'm actually quite happy that at the end of the day that inflation's going to go down, because it's put a lot of pressure onto families and people.
It sounds good, but of course everything's going up, so I suppose at the end of the day we'll be back to sort of square one.
It's very positive, mainly because it'll help with our student budgets and mainly our student finance. As I know at the moment, rent's going up for students and who are living in student halls.
But what about the cut in fuel duty, extended for another year?
The things I was looking for today were kind of around fuel, corporation tax and energy policy. And I think whilst the Chancellor's delivered something fairly boring and bog standard, the things that I was really looking for some kind of excitement and positivity to help me grow my business haven't really delivered.
Delivering that growth is what this budget's all about, according to the Chancellor. All eyes now on whether the economy grows, and if so, by how much. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Oh, he's smiling at least. Well, more budget reaction to come in the next hour and more on this government ban on TikTok on government phones. We'll be hearing as to whether this should be a worry for us with that app on our personal phones. Let's see what the weather's up to now.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A grey, damp and breezy day today for many of us, but it is much milder for the vast majority compared with recent days. We've got a number of weather fronts moving through. We've already seen a warm front move through. That's brought the milder air from the southwest with it. Tightly packed isobars, gusty winds and a cold front pushing in from the afternoon with some spells of rain on it, initially affecting northern and western England, parts of Wales, as well as much as Scotland. A damp afternoon to come here with gusty winds as well. Some brighter skies ahead of that front for East Anglia and the southeast, and brighter skies as it clears Northern Ireland, although as temperatures rise to 15 or even 16 Celsius here, we could see some sharp showers or even a few rumbles of thunder into the afternoon and evening. And those showers will spread into central and southern Scotland during the evening as well, so some hefty downpours. But across central and southern parts of England, we've got spells of rain as the cold front slows down. The rain easing for a time during the early hours, but a lot of cloud about, and with the cloud and that air coming from the south and southwest, it is going to be a mild night away from the far north. Low single figures for Shetland, but otherwise for the vast majority mid to high single figures. Rainfall returns across southern and southeast England as we begin Friday, an area of rain clearing slowly through the morning. Elsewhere, a lot of showers occurring, some heavy downpours with hail possible across central and southern parts of England, but in between, some sunny spells, and it's another warm afternoon with temperatures reaching 16, possibly even 17 Celsius in some central and northeastern parts. The showers continue for a time on Friday evening, and actually there'll be some longer spells of rain across parts of western Scotland into northern Scotland later as well. But it's another mild night, and so on Saturday we start off with that mild air. A lot of cloud again on Saturday with spells of rain, especially in the north. Drier on Sunday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon to you and welcome to GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst. Coming up for you this Thursday lunchtime. The verdicts are in on Jeremy Hunt and his budget, and it's not all good news for the Chancellor and his red box. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility has run its slide rule over the figures. It says the government's been gaming the economy. The overall tax burden now to rise to the highest level since World War II. We'll be getting reaction and expert analysis from across the country as we continue to crunch the numbers for you. Meanwhile, the strikes continue. RMT rail members, teachers and university staff all taking industrial action in the continuing disputes over pay and conditions. It follows one of the biggest days of strike action in a decade. Our reporters again out and about to get the latest for you. The 400-year-old hotel engulfed by fire in the early hours of this morning. The Angel Inn in Midhurst, housing Ukrainian refugees. A local resident who witnessed the fire said 30 people, including children, were rescued. We'll have the latest from the scene. And in terms of the latest headlines, let's get an update now with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the impact of the government's new childcare subsidy on the labour market is highly uncertain. It's after the Chancellor announced children over 9 months would be entitled to 30 hours of free care a week. The independent group also said scrapping the pension's lifetime allowance was unlikely to play a big part in increasing the workforce, but warned it would be expensive. Labour has pledged to reverse the pension plans, saying it will only help the richest 1%. But Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, says it will tackle early retirement within the NHS.
The driver for this policy was what the BMA wanted for consultants, senior doctors who across the country are deciding not to stay for perhaps the last 10 years of their working life. We need those people to make that decision to continue to work in the NHS right now, given the backlogs. If we could have done it quickly, which is very doubtful, for just one profession, would have then launched legal challenges.
Health unions representing nurses and ambulance workers in England are close to resolving an ongoing pay dispute with the government. The proposed deal is expected to include a one-off payment for the current financial year. The government is also expected to increase a previously suggested rise of 3.5% for the next financial year from April. Commuters are facing another round of rail strikes today as members of the RMT union walk out in a long-running dispute over pay. Passengers are being warned to expect disruption as 3 in 5 services across the UK are cancelled. Further strike action is also planned for the 30th of March and the 1st of April. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says the pay offer of a 5% rise for last year and a further 4% rise this year equates to a real terms pay cut.
All of those pay increases, such as they are, which are amount to pay cuts, have got to be funded by changes to our members' working conditions. So it's a self-funded pay rise, really, and that's very difficult for us because the conditions they're putting on that deal are just not acceptable to our people. So we're stuck in a deadlock, really, where the offer is underfunded, the conditions are not acceptable, and we haven't got a way forward.
The government has imposed a ban on the video app TikTok on all government devices with immediate effect. Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden told the Commons it's a precautionary measure following the National Cyber Security Centre's review of the Chinese-owned app. The United States, Canada and Belgium have already introduced similar measures. The London Stock Exchange has rebounded after suffering its worst losses since the start of the COVID pandemic. Yesterday, the FTSE 100 closed down more than 292 points as worldwide banking stocks went into freefall. Credit Suisse will borrow up to £45 billion from Switzerland's central bank in an emergency loan. It's after shares in the firm dropped by more than a quarter, leading to uncertainty within the markets. A 400-year-old hotel which was housing Ukrainian refugees has been engulfed by a fire at West Sussex. The fire broke out after midnight at a neighbouring property before spreading to the roof of the Angel Inn. West Sussex Fire and Rescue Services described the blaze as significant, with 14 fire engines responding to the incident. Over 30 people were evacuated, but no casualties were reported. The Pentagon has released video of the moment a Russian fighter jet nearly collided with a US drone over the Black Sea earlier this week. The declassified video shows the Russian plane approaching the unmanned drone. It dumped fuel nearby, which damaged its propeller. Russia has denied accusations that its jet acted recklessly in the incident which happened on Tuesday. Sir Richard Branson's space rocket firm Virgin Orbit is pausing all operations amid financial concerns. It's understood the company is to furlough all of its employees in order to buy time to finalise a new investment plan. Last month, it tried but failed to launch 9 satellites into the Earth's orbit from Newquay in Cornwall. And NASA has unveiled a prototype of the spacesuit set to be worn by the next astronauts to walk on the moon's surface. Not the usual white, the new black suit with orange markers features light bands, high-definition cameras and allows for greater mobility. The suit will be used during the Artemis mission, scheduled for 2025. You're up to date on GB News. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Bethany, thank you. Suits you, or space suits you, maybe. Very fetching. Now, let's update you on the budget delivered in the space of just 55 minutes by Jeremy Hunt. But more than 24 hours later, the calculations still being made as to whether we are better or worse off. Well, the Chancellor insisting the budget for growth will get young parents and those over 50s back into work. But the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility says the government has been gaming the economy and that the overall tax burden will now be the highest since the Second World War at 37.3% of GDP. Let's get live reaction out Westminster and join our political reporter Olivia Utley there, because Olivia, clearly some of the backbenchers, Tory backbenchers, were pretty muted yesterday. They'll be going through the Red Book today to look at the data. Are they, worried that this is actually tax raising rather than tax cutting as they wanted?
Yeah, there are certainly some worries about that. Of course, the corporation tax was raised from 19% to 25%, as was threatened. And to try and mitigate against that, Jeremy Hunt introduced a policy whereby companies can expense everything that they buy for the company, all machinery, etc. They can set it all against taxes. Well, that's all very well as far as it goes. But, as you suggested there, it might be a bit of a sleight of hand, because actually they're only allowed to do it for 3 years. And there are a couple of other measures in the budget there which some Tory MPs feel is Jeremy Hunt sort of gaming the system, or cracking a sledgehammer, using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut is a phrase I've heard as well. Essentially, this is a back-to-work budget aimed to get early retirees, young parents and those on sick leave back into work. But the OBR calculations suggest that it will only get 110,000 people back into work. Now, that's a drop in the ocean when you consider that it's going to cost the Treasury between 6 and 7 billion. There are also a few instances in the budget where the incentives seem to be lined up wrong. So, for example, there's a cliff edge break whereby parents who earn, if one parent earns over 100,000, then they won't be entitled to the free childcare at all. Well, you might think that is completely understandable. Someone on 100,000 won't need the help. The issue is that someone on over 100,000 may be incentivised to cut their hours in order to get that free childcare, which obviously isn't particularly good for growth. So there are a few instances where it just feels as though Jeremy Hunt may have been playing the system a little bit, and there'll be backbenchers who aren't happy about that.
Yeah, and other questions too about the political strategy, in that it appears to have given Labour a bit of a gift to come back at the government about this bung, as they said, for pension millionaires.
Yes, there are plenty who think that this is a bit of an own goal. So what the government's done is uncap the amount that people can put into their pension pots. The cap was at £1 million. So those who are the people who are going to benefit from that will tend to be the richest. Anyone who's managed to save more than £1 million for their pension isn't badly off at all. Now, the government will respond to that the people who will benefit are senior doctors, senior people in the public service who we need to have back in the workforce. But again, there are hints of cracking a walnut with a sledgehammer there. To get a few doctors back into work, you've cost the Treasury a huge amount of money. So that does feel like it might be quite an easy win for Labour going forwards.
Yeah. Olivia, thank you for that. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is speaking at the moment. We'll, of course, head back to the Commons if there's something we can pick up on that. But let's get the views now of Angela Knight joining us, former CEO of Energy UK. And Angela, a bit of good news, of course, for domestic fuel bills, although industry might be counting the cost still of things going up. But the Chancellor's sort of bought himself a bit of time, hasn't he, with the wholesale cost of energy, gas particularly, falling on the markets?
Yes, and it's falling fast as well. So although, you know, he's maintained the cap at £2,500 a year for an average household, however you calculate it, but, you know, you've got to start somewhere. The reality is, if we're looking at 2023, we're not going to be paying £2,500. And that is because the wholesale prices have come down well. It actually, partly that, of course, is because it's been a warmer winter than expected. But it's also mainly because now the Western world is getting used to not having to buy gas from Russia. So it's got itself reorganised, if you like, where we get our gas from. The shock is therefore just about out of the system. So I would have thought, taking that average calculation, you're more like looking at 2,100, 2,200 in 2023, so even under the 2,500. But we will not be going back to the sort of prices which we paid before the pandemic. So I'm afraid that, you know, there has been a doubling of energy costs to households, and of course industry feels it too. And partly that doesn't sit around anything to do with Ukraine or Russia. It sits around the fact that there's a massive investment required in this country, as indeed in other countries, in building the renewable generation, in building new nuclear and so on to meet our carbon targets.
I was going to ask you about that because we had the announcements on nuclear, and clearly this is something that they want to push for. But, you know, that could be decades off and huge investment needed. So therefore, are we going to, in the short term, have to pay higher energy bills to pay for that investment?
Well, first of all, nuclear is not necessarily as expensive as sometimes people think. Because, you know, one thinks of nuclear and these great big plants that take 10 years and cost 20 billion, and actually that's not necessarily where we're going to go. Yeah, we'll have one or two of them, but we're also going down the route of what's called the small-scale nuclear reactors. You can build those in a year or so at the cost of $1.5 billion or so. Now, that's still a big number, but what it does mean is you can get your nuclear done quickly, and what's more, you can get that international investment in, which is very important, because otherwise it's sitting on on the public sector, on the taxpayer all the time. And the investment breaks that have been announced in the budget will be attractive for that sort of investment. So good on. I do think that whilst everybody always sits back and complains about every budget that I've ever known, that, you know, you hear all the gainsayers. And it's ever so easy to be, you know, an armchair expert in all this thing. The reality of the changes that have been made yesterday will help investment into big infrastructure projects in this country. They will be particularly helpful for business. After all, so much of the small companies, they don't pay the higher rate of corporation tax anyway. It's only about 10% will be paying that. And there's investment relief, so the sorts of things that many of the large companies were asking for. So there's a lot of changes there.
Yeah, but the criticism is that relief that they get on the investment is only for 3 years. And people are saying, look, if you're a big company, you're looking at a much longer period than that. And maybe they want the certainty of having relief for, you know, 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely. But they've said 3 years now, haven't they? I mean, Jeremy Hunt is saying that, you know, it's that's what he can he can finance at the moment. I mean, everything is in a budget, is what you can finance today, because tomorrow, year, 2 years out, it looks different. I mean, if you pick up sort of some of the complaints that have been made about the tax burdens going up, tax burdens only going up, or the main reason it's going up is because of freezing the limits. So instead of automatically, the point at which you pay tax or the point at which you pay higher tax sort of goes up on an annual basis, he's frozen that for the time being. So the reality of today is if he said, right, you're going to get that investment relief for 10 years, I'm going to allow all those limits to go up, we could have had in fact, the likelihood would have been bad reactions in the market, people saying, oh, well, that's not believable. You haven't done a proper, sensible budget. The economists would have, the OBR would have said, that's going to cause the country a problem. So what he's done is he said, I can do this now. I may have to freeze this now, and I can give you an allowance now, but that's what I can do now.
Yeah.
And with the allowances, he said, and I can see that, the investment allowance, for 3 years. That's a pretty good incentive.
Okay.
And if the economy starts to grow as is anticipated, then he or whoever is the Chancellor of the day will have the ability in the budget to increase that length of period for those investment reliefs.
Okay. Angela, thank you for that, although we do reflect that Richard Hughes, the chairman of the OBR, has called that particular approach gaming the economy. That's the reaction that they gave a little earlier on that, promising of perhaps better conditions after the 3 years. But let's get another view now with Joe Shallam, who's Policy Director at the Centre for Social Justice. Joe, thanks for joining us. Has there been social justice in this budget?
Well, it was dubbed the Back to Work budget by your reporter just then. I think it's fair to say it's lived up to that name. And, there've been some very kind of eye-catching announcements on childcare, multi-billion-pound announcements there, things on pensions as well. But when you look under the bonnet of this budget, what I think is altogether more ambitious are the measures being taken for people with long-term sicknesses and disabilities, and really specific measures targeted to help that group into work. And so, I think there has been a little bit of social justice going back to the heart of British politics here.
And you believe that those measures will encourage people back to work rather than force them back to work, as some people fear?
I do. So to kind of recap a little bit, we know that there's about 9 million people who are inactive, and there's actually fewer people who are inactive now due to early retirement than before the pandemic. But the real driver in that has been long-term sickness, where we've seen an increase of about 16%. And one of the things that is often forgotten in this debate is since the pandemic, we've seen an explosion in working age welfare. That's people falling out of work and moving on to working age benefits. And again, scratching beneath the surface, as we often try to do at the CSJ, you find that the fastest growing group within that are those with benefits that, they're sort of outside of the whole conditionality regime due to health conditions and other things going on. So the package of measures that the Chancellor's brought through, with universal support being in there, but also changes to the assessments regime, will help people into work without pushing them. It's about unlocking those that potential of people who want to work, much more carrot than stick.
OK. What is your take then on this decision on pensions and the lifetime allowance? I mean, Labour saying this is a pensions bung for the millionaires, but clearly the government was looking at the position in terms of the health system, particularly with senior doctors and consultants, where they were retiring early and indicating they didn't want to get, I think it's a 55% tax charge, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Labour need to be a bit careful here. One of the criticisms or comments I've heard about the budget since it was made yesterday was the lack of kind of public services being within there. But, this is a measure that people like the Shadow Health Secretary have been looking at specifically for the purposes of helping keep senior doctors and other NHS professionals in work longer, which ultimately has a net effect of more appointments, more people getting the healthcare that they need. So, this can't be viewed purely through the lens of kind of fiscal policy, through tax fairness. I should think this is actually more appropriately seen as a public services measure and one that hopefully will do its job of keeping more NHS staff in work.
Yes, and I think in terms of the potential savings. Jeremy Hunt saying it could reduce $3 billion a year being spent on locum doctors having to replace staff at the moment. But, Joe, thank you very much indeed for your reaction. And, of course, we'll continue to do the number crunching for you and get reaction from across the country, as we will on the strikes. Yes, more in place today. It's the rails and the trains and the teachers and the universities. We'll be at Birmingham New Street Station for you. That's going to be exciting, I promise.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A grey, damp and breezy day today for many of us, but it is much milder for the vast majority compared with recent days. We've got a number of weather fronts moving through. We've already seen a warm front move through. That's brought the milder air from the southwest with it. Tightly packed isobars, gusty winds and a cold front pushing in from the afternoon with some spells of rain on it, initially affecting northern and western England, parts of Wales, as well as much as Scotland. A damp afternoon to come here with gusty winds as well. Some brighter skies ahead of that front for East Anglia and the southeast, and brighter skies as it clears Northern Ireland, although as temperatures rise to 15 or even 16 Celsius here, we could see some sharp showers or even a few rumbles of thunder into the afternoon and evening. And those showers will spread into central and southern Scotland during the evening as well, so some hefty downpours. But across central and southern parts of England, we've got spells of rain as the cold front slows down. The rain easing for a time during the early hours, but a lot of cloud about, and with the cloud and that air coming from the south and southwest, it is going to be a mild night away from the far north. Low single figures for Shetland, but otherwise for the vast majority, mid to high single figures. Rainfall returns across southern and southeast England as we begin Friday, an area of rain clearing slowly through the morning. Elsewhere, a lot of showers occurring, some heavy downpours with hail possible across central and southern parts of England, but in between, some sunny spells and it's another warm afternoon with temperatures reaching 16, possibly even 17 Celsius in some central and northeastern parts. The showers continue for a time on Friday evening, and actually there'll be some longer spells of rain across parts of western Scotland into northern Scotland later as well. But it's another mild night, and so on Saturday we start off with that mild air. A lot of cloud again on Saturday with spells of rain, especially in the north. Drier on Sunday.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Bit more number crunching for you now. Let's ask the question, essential move to protect the health service or a bung for pension millionaires? Yes, it's that lifting of the lifetime allowance on pensions that Labour has attacked. But let's speak now to Helen Morrissey, pensions and retirement analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown, who can join us. Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for joining us. Clearly, it took everyone a bit by surprise because they thought they may lift this allowance figure to maybe 1.5, 1.8 million, but he's just taken the cap away completely. Obviously, Labour saying, well, all you've done is given a bung to millionaires.
Absolutely. I mean, it was an enormous shock to find that they were actually going to do away with the lifetime allowance. From an overall pensions perspective, it is good news in that it does simplify people's retirement planning. What you are right in saying is that the people who are going to see the immediate benefits to it are more likely to be the higher earners.
Yeah, and Paul Johnson of the IFS saying, or surprised at it, saying this was, in that phrase, a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I mean, could it have been that the measures were put in place specifically just for NHS pensions?
So there could have been changes made to the NHS pension to kind of cover this particular group of people. I mean, I think, as you say, there was this idea that this could get doctors to stay in employment for longer. Now, with the lifetime allowance, it used to be much higher. It used to be 1.8 million, and over the years, it's been kind of frittered away at to its current level of 1 million. So I think what the concern was that over time, because people's wages were rising, more and more people were being caught out by the lifetime allowance, which could have prompted the move to increase it, or, as you say, abolish it as they have done today.
Yeah, and just to explain to people who perhaps haven't got £1 million in their pension, of course, it was a 55% tax charge if you went above that. I think £1,073,000 around that. So a pretty significant tax hit. But we've already got Labour saying, look, if we get into power, we're going to reverse this and go back to a limit. I mean, in terms of people trying to, plan their pensions on the long term, I think the phrase hokey-cokey's been used.
Yeah, absolutely, and just to highlight just how complex this system is. So, as you say, you got a 55% tax charge on lump sums over the lifetime allowance. But if you took it as an income, it was 25%. So it shows there's different tax rates there. But as you say, Labour have come straight out and said that it's poorly targeted in the current times. They would look to oppose it. So in the space of one afternoon, people have thought that they've got this extra freedom, and now there's this potential that could be taken away. So that is going to cause problems for people trying to do their long-term planning.
Yeah. Now, I know we have to go through the Red Book to look at all this as small print, but I don't think we had an announcement then on the extension of the state pension age, because that was one thing that was feared, that maybe that was going to be, pushed back yet again.
Yeah, so we are expecting a review to be announced, I think it's in May, on the decision to increase state pension age up to 68 and what date they're hoping to do that. Now, as it currently stands, it's due to happen in the mid-2040s, but there have been increasing kind of rumours that the government is going to look to bring it forward even further, to the late 2030s, or even earlier if need be. Now, if this happens, that has a significant impact on people's retirement planning. People will need to work longer, and we were wondering, would we see an announcement made on this yesterday in an effort to balance the books of the changes made to the lifetime allowance.
Yeah. OK, we'll await that or not as it comes through. Helen, thank you for joining us, pensions and retirement analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown. Thank you very much indeed. Let's step away from the budget and head back to the strikes just to keep the mood cheerful, because up to 3 in 5 train services cancelled today. The latest wave of industrial action spreading across the country. Members of the RMT now, the 14 train operating companies taking action in their long-running row over pay, jobs and conditions. So across Britain, about 40 to 50% of services running, but wide variations across the network. You're being told to obviously check your local train services. But let's head up to Birmingham New Street now and join our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson. And Jack, just to explain to people, I mean, obviously we've been talking about more strike action, but in terms of the RMT and Network Rail, There may be a deal in the offing there, which is obviously the signallers and all the track. It's still the individual train operating companies where they have to sort things out.
Yeah, so Network Rail, they've the RMT and also Network Rail have decided to put that deal to their members. It's a 9% pay rise over 2 years, which is 5% backdated for last year and 4% for this year. There was some sticking points a few months ago, you might remember, around the conditions of that deal, but that has been put to their members. The same pay offer, but different conditions have been put to their members. That's set to that ballot on whether the members will accept that deal is set to end on Monday. So we might find out next week whether that dispute, certainly between Network Rail and the RMT, is over. But as you mentioned, the 14 other train operating companies are still in dispute. A 9% pay rise has also been offered to them, with 13% to the lowest paid people within the companies. But Mick Lynch has rejected that, saying that offer is rubbish, because when you take in the retail price index of inflation over the 3 years that those members haven't had a pay rise, it reaches 22%, and so that 9% and as the highest figure of 13% for some people doesn't go anywhere near that, and so that's been rejected. But it's meant that Steve Montgomery of the Rail Delivery Group has started to question why that deal wasn't put to their members. He said many of whom would have benefited from that 13% increase, and they should have a say on their deal. The Department for Transport also saying that the RMT members at train operating companies are being denied a say on their future. But when it comes to the strike, it comes to public support, what have been people saying? Well, I've been on the streets of Birmingham today, and here's what they've had to say.
It's affecting hard-working people. People want money. People want money to live in times that are hard. Cost of living, petrol, food, energy. They deserve money like everybody else wants a decent wage to survive.
They're very inconvenient for me who's got the train today, but I absolutely understand why people are fighting for what they believe in.
It's just an inconvenience to the whole public, isn't it? But I don't think the trains have been any good ever since they were privatised, so I don't think I've seen anything improved by privatising it whatsoever. We're paying through the nose for that service, and it's next to useless.
So here at New Street Station, around 1 train per hour in each of the different lines has been running, and so it's certainly going to be a bit busy later when commuters come on the train, and services set to end at an earlier time of just after 7 o'clock today.
OK, Jack, thanks very much for updating us there. And, of course, we'll update people as we hear anything more about a breakthrough in those industrial relations. Also coming up will be live here in West Sussex on the extraordinary story of the escape of Ukrainian refugees, including children, from a 400-year-old hotel, which has been engulfed in fire. The latest from Midhurst coming up. First, let's get update on the headlines with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:33. I'm Bethany Elsey, keeping you up to date from the GB Newsroom. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the impact of the government's new childcare subsidy on the labour market is highly uncertain. It's after the Chancellor announced children over 9 months would be entitled to 30 hours of free care a week. The independent group also said scrapping the pension's lifetime allowance was unlikely to play a big part in increasing the workforce, but warned it would be expensive. Labour has pledged to reverse the pension plans, saying it will only help the richest 1%. But the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, says it will tackle early retirement within the NHS.
The driver for this policy was what the BMA wanted for consultant senior doctors who across the country are deciding not to stay for perhaps the last 10 years of their working life. We need those people to make that decision to continue to work in the NHS right now, given the backlogs. If we could have done it quickly, which is very doubtful, for just one profession, would have then launched legal challenges.
The government has imposed a ban on the video app TikTok on all government devices with immediate effect. Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden told the Commons it's a precautionary measure following the National Cyber Security Centre's review of the Chinese-owned app. The United States, Canada and Belgium have already introduced similar measures. The Duchess of Sussex has given her lemon olive oil cake recipe to a charity cookbook. All proceeds from the World Central Kitchen book will support communities impacted by natural disasters and humanitarian crises. The book will also include a recipe from former First Lady Michelle Obama. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Mark will be back with you in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, you may remember we were updating you from the Happy Toadstool Toddlers Club yesterday in terms of budget reaction, with the Chancellor announcing that he will be expanding free childcare support for working parents across England. Parents will now get 30 free hours childcare a week from the age of 9 months, providing all adults work at least 16 hours per week. The 30 hours to start from when maternity or paternity cover ends. Well, let's get more now with Rhiannon Evans, Head of Communications at Mumsnet. Rhiannon, thanks for speaking to us again. I suppose we ought to add the rider, looking at the details as we're getting this red book on the budget today, of course, that the full panoply doesn't come in until September 2025.
That's right. And I think we saw a hugely significant intervention from the Chancellor yesterday in terms of childcare. And at Mumsnet, we've been campaigning for many years for it to be recognised as the essential national infrastructure that it is. And so I think having it at the centre of a budget was really important. But as you say, there are some concerns, particularly about the time it will take to roll out, but also about whether the funding that's been allocated is sufficient for what has been promised. And so we would urge the Chancellor to engage with those concerns and set out a plan for how it will be properly funded.
OK, and that particular problem is obviously having enough staff, not just the places to run nurseries and so on. And that's been a real difficulty for some nurseries and playgroup areas, is providing the staff and then finding enough money to pay them.
That's right. So there's a real issue with recruitment and retention in the sector. And we know that the current free hours offer is already underfunded. And so if the free hours offer is expanded without an accompanying expansion of funding, then there will be real problems for the sector, and it will unfortunately force some providers to close.
And in terms of what it does for the kids as well, I think the evidence is that the younger they get into these structured play areas and sort of share social contact and things, that the better the outcome long term.
Yeah, early years education is vitally important, particularly for children from disadvantaged backgrounds and for closing that attainment gap. So we know the first 1001 days of a child's life are incredibly important for laying those foundations. And we know that the provision of childcare is also really helpful for parents. So we think that parents should be able to make decisions about what's best for them, what's best for their families and their children. And for some families, that will entail both parents going out to work. And at the minute, because of the cost of childcare, that's simply not an option for many families.
Yeah. OK, well, Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed for your reaction. We're just playing the pictures once more of the very happy Toadstools Club that we visited yesterday with the kids enjoying themselves there. Thank you for allowing us in, by the way, to film there yesterday. But let's get more reaction now, where we can head back to Doncaster. It was a bit grey and gloomy earlier. Let's see if Liam can lift that for us, because you were... Yeah, OK, partly. Any blue sky?
No blue sky here in South Yorkshire, but a lot of grit and determination. Mark, I'm here at Doncaster Airport. It was a bustling air terminal. Over 1 million passengers were processed through the terminal behind me in a single year in 2019. Flights taking off to America, the European mainland, a major local employer. The airport is now closed. It closed in October, and I'm up here reporting on the battle being fought by locals to get it back open. It is a symbol of economic regeneration and hope, and I'm delighted to be joined by the local MP, Nick Fletcher. Nick Fletcher, you are Doncaster born and bred. We're in the Don Valley here. This is a key red wall seat. You beat the Labour frontbencher Caroline Flint to become the first Tory MP ever in this constituency. Do you think yesterday's budget, Nick, is going to help you to hold this seat?
It'll go somewhere there, yes. Yesterday's budget gave Doncaster a partnership with the central government with levelling up funding. There was also an announcement for an investment zone in South Yorkshire, so I'm hoping that will come to Doncaster too. So yes, there was definitely things in there which will help Doncaster grow.
I've been talking to people here in Doncaster last night in the Parkside Club, where I know you got married back in the day. The sense was, Nick, with all respect, there wasn't much in this budget for the working man and woman. I heard that phrase a couple of times.
Well, the Chancellor's done an awful lot with energy. He's also helping with childcare. He's put a stop to the prepayment meters, which I know affects an awful lot of people in Doncaster too. So there was definitely some things in there. And I know people are upset with the pension lifetime allowance uplift, as though it only helps the wealthy people. But that does get doctors back into those surgeries. It does get that waiting list down, which is what people want from our NHS.
And we are standing just outside Doncaster Airport. We're not allowed in. There's lots of security here. The site has been mothballed. You used to come here as a lad, you told me. You saw Harrier jump jets take off here. You saw Concorde take off from here. It is a major regional airport, and it was bustling and hustling and generating growth here in South Yorkshire before COVID lockdown. Can it reopen?
Yes, I think it can. It's a fantastic facility. I'm hoping there's somebody out there who can see what this area can bring to any investment portfolio, and hopefully we'll get people flying from Doncaster again in the not too distant future.
What does it mean to the local economy, to local business leaders, to local people who were employed here or just used Doncaster Airport to travel for business or for pleasure?
Well, it means something to every single demographic that you spoke of. I mean, it's people who are ever so fond of this airport. It was definitely a sign of Doncaster being put on the map, so it's hugely disappointing on that level. But yes, you get growth around an airport, real economic growth, and it's something that Doncaster needs.
I guess the model that Doncaster could follow, or one model, is what happened up on Teesside. Teesside Airport was under threat. You had a local Tory mayor for Tees Valley, Ben Houchin. He got a consortium together, he got some local authority funding in, and he bought the airport. Are your local politicians doing the same? Can you do the same?
Well, I've been asking the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority to do exactly that. They did put some monies forward to actually keep it open for 13 months. At that point, Peel refused that. But I think we can see, exactly as you said, what Ben Houchen's done up in Tees Valley is an example of what can happen around an airport. And all you see and all you hear from Ben Houchen is investment and more opportunities for the people of Tees Valley. And we need that in South Yorkshire.
And going back to yesterday's budget, Nick, if I may, how comfortable are you that under a Conservative government the tax burden is now approaching a 70-year high? How is that going to help areas like Doncaster to regenerate, to grow?
Well, I'm a true blue Conservative and I want low taxes, I want economic growth and I want personal responsibility and I want people to be able to use their own money how they want to use it. I do believe that makes the economy a lot more it makes the economy grow a lot more quickly, and I think that's what we need. So yeah, we've gone through some tough times. We've spent £407 billion on a pandemic. We've got people through that. We've kept businesses open. We've kept people being able to pay their mortgages. Now we need to gradually come out of this and move forward, and hopefully over the next 18 months we can see some real packages come together which will really stimulate growth for Doncaster and for the country as a whole.
Is levelling up just a slogan, Nick Fletcher? Some people here think it is. Some people think that the Tories haven't really got their arms around this major issue.
Levelling up's not just a slogan, but it is going to take quite a few years to... We've had 60 years of neglect in Doncaster under a Labour authority. We've got a Conservative MP for the first time. I'm going to do everything I can to hold an authority to account, or the government account, to make sure that Doncaster thrives. Levelling up is not a slogan, and I'm going to make sure that it's not.
And are you hopeful that maybe this time next year, a pre-budget, a pre-election budget, there may be a few more sweeties in the form of tax breaks? Were you disappointed, Nick, that there weren't lower taxes in this budget, or even a freeze in corporation tax, which a lot of Tory backbenchers wanted?
Well, I'm always disappointed when there's not tax cuts. As I say, I'm a Conservative and that's what I want. I think we should always grow the pie and take a smaller piece from it. But we are in a situation at this moment, as everyone is well aware, that we've spent an awful lot of money keeping businesses and keeping people afloat during the pandemic. Yet, hopefully over the next 12 months, we can see some giveaways and we can really make a difference.
And just tell us once again, we are in front of this magnificent airport. It's so impressive, the facility here. We're surrounded by hotels, leisure facilities that are now dormant because this airport is closed. You've been involved with this airport for a long time. You travelled from here, I think the first or second day it opened as a civilian airport back in 2005. Just paint a picture to people who may be watching of what Doncaster Airport could be, what it could mean to the city of Doncaster, to South Yorkshire, to the entire region.
We could have 2.5 million passengers flying from there extremely easily. We could have businesses setting up all the way around this area. There's 800 acres of prime land for all different kinds of opportunities. I'm trying to get an advanced manufacturing research centre here. I'm trying to get Boeing here. I'm trying to get hybrid air vehicles here. This is all here ready for the taking. We just need someone who's got the vision, who's actually got the money, and we can actually make this a wonderful place for the United Kingdom.
Well, Nick Fletcher, you are the MP for Don Valley, the first Tory MP ever to represent this proud constituency. Doncaster born and bred. Thanks a lot for appearing on GB News. Well, Mark, the battle to keep this airport open is hotting up. We've been talking to lots of local people today. As I said earlier, I'll be putting that together in a special GB News report on the battle to save Doncaster Airport. Back to you.
Yeah, and see if we can get it flying high again. Liam, thank you very much for updating us at the scene. As Liam says, more to come in that special report in the coming days. But let's update you now on this historic 400-year-old hotel, the Angel Inn, housing Ukrainian refugees engulfed by fire at Midhurst in West Sussex in the early hours of this morning. 30 residents, including many children, were safely rescued after the fire spread from a neighbouring property in the main street there, North Street in Midhurst. Well, let's get more with our national reporter, Theo Chicombo, who's at the scene. And Theo, clearly the investigation continuing, but thankfully they got everyone out. It must have been a dramatic scene early this morning.
It was in the early hours of this morning. This building behind me, a 400-year-old, was engulfed with fire. There were Ukrainians staying in there with their kids as well, and they were shocked to see what happened. Members of the community were here rallying around to see what help they could offer to them to get them out of this situation. Since the early hours of this morning, there have been 15 fire engines coming in and out of here. You may be able to see just over my left shoulder, there's a big yellow pipe which is running down to the river, which is around 200-300 yards from where we are at the moment, and the water from there is being used by the fire brigade here. And in the last few moments I spoke to Ruben, who is a manager at a restaurant just along this main high street here in Midhurst, and he was here at 1 o'clock in the morning and he helped some of the people who were in there. This is what he had to say.
I just finished work about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and one of my colleagues see the smoke, a lot of smoke coming up from the town, and he just said to me, there's a fire on the town. So I just called 999 straight away, and they said they got the news, and by the time I came, I see the fire engine came up, and that all you can see on my video is fire and everything. So there's some Ukrainian refugee, about 34 people, which is they are safe, yeah, and well, so. Yeah, I offered them on the cold weather. They were outside, and I offered them to come to the restaurant and sit down here. So they came with me, and they sit down, they have a drinks, tea, coffee, and I gave them a blanket and everything.
Well, as you heard there from Ruben, he was one of the first people here on the scene, and I asked him how people were responding. Small children, he was with them even till the early hours of this morning, around 6 a.m. Small young children who of course have been impacted by this, and of course there's a whole community which is rallying around. The local council has been receiving donations. They've said they've received so many of them that they are asking people not to come and give any more, but for now investigations continues. There are some concerns about the building, hence why it's still cordoned off. People are not allowed beyond this point, and they're anticipating that this could be something that is happening here for the next few days. The road will be closed for those who want to come in and out of here as the investigations continue.
Thank you very much indeed for updating us there. And, of course, we'll find out what happens to all those Ukrainian refugees, particularly the children, and where they'll be housed for tonight, of course. Thanks very much indeed. Now, let's return to Cheltenham. The festival, a thrilling week so far, penultimate day. So let's actually get more with Derek Thompson, the presenter and commentator, joining us there once more. Thank you very much for your time. After we spoke to the 6'4" jockey earlier, who was updating us, and he's going to be racing against his sister, Jack Andrews and Gina, the Challenge Cup Amateur Jockey Handicap Chase. Not one of the big races, but clearly it indicates, you know, everyone is welcome at Cheltenham.
Oh, I tell you what, it's going to be incredible. You know what I call Jack? I call him the big fella because he is 6'4" in old money. In new money, that's absolutely massive. And you can imagine the average height of the jump jockey would probably be about 5'7", 5'8" at the most. So he will stand out in the jockey's room, but on a horse, he is superb. He rides a horse called A Night in Lambourne in the 5:30. He comes from a great family, and I tell you what, he's got a good chance.
Oh, great. Good. And talking about big numbers, I'm just looking at what happened with the Champion Chase yesterday. Tony Bloom, of course, owner of Brighton and Hove Albion, and I think he pocketed, was it £830,000 on his bet, the biggest ever placed in Cheltenham?
Yes, Tony had a good day. The chairman of Brighton scored big time here at Cheltenham yesterday. Yeah, he had £100,000 to win on a junior mutant, not easy to pronounce, Edgermine, and won 1.2 million. That's the way to do it, Mark.
Wow. Yeah, and in terms of the winners and losers, obviously it's... and we got the rugby, I know, in Dublin this coming weekend. It is Ireland versus GB. I think it's in the Prestbury Cup in terms of overall winners. How are the stakes looking in terms of that particular contest?
I think you can safely say that Ireland will win that. But, guys, I've got good news. An English horse has won the first race. Yahoo! If you back Stage Star at 15-2, that has just won the Turner's Novice Chase. It's a big Grade 1. And that was ridden by Harry Compton for Paul Nicholls. So we've had a British win. It makes a welcome change. But it's great having the Irish over here. It really is what it's all about, you know. And we've got some great racing today. We've got the Ryanair, which is a big Group 1. We've got the Stayers Hurdle. And later on, Mark, we have got the Jack de Bromhead Mares Hurdle, named after the young man who was killed in a riding accident last year. Yeah. And Henry de Bromhead, his father, runs 5 horses in that race. Wow. And I tell you what, come round the winner's enclosure. If he wins, this will be the greatest sight in the world.
Yeah, and plenty of cheers, quite rightly, as well. And, of course, as you say, the big man, Jack Andrews, in action a little later as well. A great day there at Cheltenham. Thanks for updating us. We'll let you get back to the action. Thank you very much.
With pleasure. Enjoy.
And, of course, we'll update you on that particular result, or all the results here on GB News a little later, with Jack up against his sister in that race, Gina, only 5'7", of course. Coming up, we'll update you with all this reaction to the budget, the latest on the strikes too, and why TikTok may be off government phones. Before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A grey, damp and breezy day today for many of us, but it is much milder for the vast majority compared with recent days. We've got a number of weather fronts moving through. We've already seen a warm front move through. That's brought the milder air from the southwest with it. Tightly packed isobars, gusty winds and a cold front pushing in from the afternoon with some spells of rain on it, initially affecting northern and western England, parts of Wales, as well as much as Scotland. A damp afternoon to come here with gusty winds as well. Some brighter skies ahead of that front for East Anglia and the southeast, and brighter skies as it clears Northern Ireland, although as temperatures rise to 15 or even 16 Celsius here, we could see some sharp showers or even a few rumbles of thunder into the afternoon and evening. And those showers will spread into central and southern Scotland during the evening as well, so some hefty downpours. But across central and southern parts of England, we've got spells of rain as the cold front slows down. The rain easing for a time during the early hours, but a lot of cloud about, and with the cloud and that air coming from the south and southwest, it is going to be a mild night away from the far north. Low single figures for Shetland, but otherwise for the vast majority mid to high single figures. Rainfall returns across southern and southeast England as we begin Friday, an area of rain clearing slowly through the morning. Elsewhere, a lot of showers occurring, some heavy downpours with hail possible across central and southern parts of England, but in between, some sunny spells, and it's another warm afternoon with temperatures reaching 16, possibly even 17 Celsius in some central and northeastern parts. The showers continue for a time on Friday evening, and actually there'll be some longer spells of rain across parts of western Scotland into northern Scotland later as well. But it's another mild night, and so on Saturday we start off with that mild air. A lot of cloud again on Saturday with spells of rain, especially in the north. Drier on Sunday.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 2 o'clock and you're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Thursday afternoon. The Chancellor facing a budget backlash now from Tory MPs as the tax burden is set to reach the highest level since the Second World War. Jeremy Hunt, though, doubling down on his insistence that higher taxes are needed to keep on top of the finances, despite warnings that the burden is now rising by the equivalent of £4,200 a year per household. Reaction from across the country coming up. Meanwhile, the strikes continue. RMT rail members, teachers, university staff all taking more industrial action in the continuing disputes over pay and conditions. Our reporters out and about for you getting the latest. And as Elon Musk's SpaceX gets set to launch another batch of Starlink satellites, Virgin Orbit pausing operations at the UK satellite launch company in Newquay. We ask an astrophysicist, is it really the final frontier for Cornwall? For that, latest news with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the impact of the government's new childcare subsidy on the labour market is highly uncertain. It's after the Chancellor announced children over 9 months would be entitled to 30 hours of free care a week. The independent group also said scrapping the pension's lifetime allowance was unlikely to play a big part in increasing the workforce, but warned it would be expensive. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has pledged to reverse the pension plans, saying it will only help the richest 1%.
The idea that a £1 billion giveaway to the richest 1% was necessary just falls apart the moment it's examined. But it is about priorities. You know, the government has chosen not to prioritise those families that are really struggling. Energy bills, yes, of course, there's some cap on it, but they're still double what they were just a few months ago. And, you know, a lot of people are paying £2,000 more on their mortgage because of the mess that the government have made.
Health unions representing nurses and ambulance workers in England are close to resolving an ongoing pay dispute with the government. The proposed deal is expected to include a one-off payment for the current financial year. The government is also expected to increase a previously suggested pay rise of 3.5% for the next financial year, starting in April. Commuters are facing another round of rail strikes today as members of the RMT union walk out in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Passengers are being warned to expect disruption as 3 in 5 services across the UK are cancelled. Further strike action is planned for the 30th of March and the 1st of April. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says the pay offer of a 5% rise for last year and a further 4% rise this year equates to a real terms pay cut.
All of those pay increases, such as they are, which are amount to pay cuts, have got to be funded by changes to our members' working conditions. So it's a self-funded pay rise, really, and that's very difficult for us, because the conditions they're putting on that deal are just not acceptable to our people. So we're stuck in a deadlock, really, where the offer is underfunded, the conditions are not acceptable, and we haven't got a way forward.
The London Stock Exchange has rebounded after suffering its worst losses since the start of the COVID pandemic. Yesterday, the FTSE 100 closed down more than 292 points as worldwide banking stocks went into free fall. Credit Suisse will borrow up to £45 billion from Switzerland's central bank in an emergency loan. It's after shares in the firm dropped by more than a quarter, leading to uncertainty within the financial markets. The government has imposed a ban on the video app TikTok on all government devices with immediate effect. Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden told the Commons it's a precautionary measure following the National Cybersecurity Centre's review of the Chinese-owned app. The United States, Canada and Belgium have already introduced similar measures. In the last half an hour, 2 more men have been charged after a drive-by shooting outside a church in London in January. 22-year-old Tyrell Lacroix and 23-year-old Jordan Walters have been charged with 6 counts of wounding with intent. Yesterday, 19-year-old Alrico Nelson Martin was charged with possession of a shotgun with intent to endanger life, as well as 6 other counts of intent. 4 women and 2 girls were injured in the incident, with one of them still undergoing hospital treatment. A 400-year-old hotel, which was housing Ukrainian refugees in West Sussex, has been engulfed by a major fire. The blaze broke out after midnight at a neighbouring property before spreading to the roof of the Angel Inn. West Sussex Fire and Rescue Services described the incident as significant, with 14 fire engines attending the scene. Over 30 people were evacuated. No casualties were reported. The Pentagon has released video of the moment a Russian fighter jet nearly collided with a US drone over the Black Sea early this week. The declassified video shows the Russian plane approaching the unmanned drone and dumping fuel nearby, which damaged its propeller. Russia has denied accusations that its jet acted recklessly in the incident, which happened on Tuesday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. Bit of breaking news coming in for you. It's the England squad being announced ahead of the 2024 Euro qualifiers. And the headlines so far, Ivan Toney, the Brentford striker, is in, despite that imminent hearing into alleged betting offences. Meanwhile, Kyle Walker also included, despite being the subject of a police investigation. Harry Maguire picked, despite limited game time for Manchester United. But we've got both Raheem Sterling and Trent Alexander-Arnold out. Shock omissions, some may say, but Gareth Southgate is revealing his reasons at the moment. We'll have more reaction to that as it comes in. But plenty more reaction, of course, to the budget after Jeremy Hunt's details being sort of filled out, if you like, in the Red Book today, all the various details, with politicians and finance experts beating a path to TV and radio studios to air their views. But what do you make of the budget? Well, Jeff Moody has been finding out what you really think of what we've heard.
The battered red box. It's the talk of the town as politicians and pundits pick through the bones of Jeremy Hunt's budget bonanza. But away from Westminster, are we talking about the budget too?
We are talking about the budget. It is something that has a massive impact to our business. As a small, local, independent business, the budget has increased a lot of our prices that we've never had to experience before.
But what have people been telling the People's Channel? 30 hours a week of free childcare has got us talking.
It's great news for parents. It gives them the opportunity to go back to work sooner, which is so important now for all mums and dads in this country to be able to get to work as soon as possible, especially with the living crisis as well, which is a whole other situation.
There may be hidden talents within the mums and dads that are having to stay at home due to the cost of childcare at the moment. Working whilst having to pay for childcare is a massive no-no to a lot of parents.
The Chancellor says he's proving the doubters wrong. We're not in recession, technically at least. And on the streets of Birmingham, relief.
Well, I'm actually quite happy that at the end of the day that inflation's going to go down, because it's put a lot of pressure onto families and people.
It sounds good, but of course everything's going up, so I suppose at the end of the day we'll be back to sort of square one.
It's very positive, mainly because it'll help with our student budgets and mainly our student finance. As I know at the moment, rent's going up for students and who are living in student halls.
But what about the cut in fuel duty, extended for another year?
The things I was looking for today were kind of around fuel, corporation tax and energy policy. And I think whilst the Chancellor's delivered something fairly boring and bog standard, the things that I was really looking for some kind of excitement and positivity to help me grow my business haven't really delivered.
Delivering that growth is what this budget's all about, according to the Chancellor. All eyes now on whether the economy grows, and if so, by how much. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, much reaction, of course, to the announcement on pensions in terms of trying to retain doctors and senior consultants and to help the NHS. But, of course, we've had the industrial action continuing. We just had the 3 days of the junior doctors. But we are getting indications, perhaps, that there may be movement in terms of the nurses and other health professionals. Let's get more now with our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who's joining us from Westminster. And Olivia, a bit of mood music that maybe there is some kind of deal in the offing.
Yes, it sounds like there is a deal in the offing. I'm actually now in Euston, outside the Unison offices, where we're expecting to hear an announcement at some point this afternoon. The murmurings are that the government has made an offer to the unions, and the unions will now be putting it forward to their members, and it sounds as though they are going to advise their members to accept the offer. Now, what the offer is, of course, the offer previously on the table was a 3.5% pay rise for next year, but no rise at all for this year. The government said it was impossible to reopen negotiations surrounding this year's pay. Well, now they seem to have changed their tune on that. It sounds as though Steve Barclay is going to offer health workers a 5% pay rise from next year going forwards, and a one-off 6% pay rise for backdated 2022-2023 financial year. Now, that'll be broken into two parts, a 2% pay rise as a COVID deal and then a one-off 4% pay award for good work. But essentially, yes, this is big movement from the government here. And although there are still quite a lot of hurdles yet to clear, it's possible, of course, that the unions don't recommend to their members that they accept the deal, and it's possible then that the members, even if they are recommended to vote for it, end up not voting for it. Still some hurdles to cross. But it does sound as though we are further ahead in the progress towards a deal than we have been previously.
OK, and as you've indicated, the complication being there are several unions, the RCN, GMB and Unison and so on. Do we know about the backdated deal? Because one of the sticking points was whether this was consolidated, as they say, i.e. just a one-off deal for 1 year, or whether that was actually going to be included then for future pay rises in terms of percentage increases.
So what it sounds like is going to happen is there'll be a one-off consolidated payment for the 2022-23 year, amounting to somewhere in the region of 6%. And then separately, we're expecting to see a 5% rise for the subsequent years going forward, so 2023, 24, etc. Now, I should just say here that this is only in concern to a particular group of workers. So it's nurses, ambulance workers, etc. It doesn't include the doctors who are on strike at the moment. And as you say, there are a number of unions involved here. There are up to 14 unions, actually, some of them representing very small groups, but 14 unions altogether. And although some of the big ones, it sounds like they are going to accept it, it's possible that some of the others suggest to their members that they don't vote in favour of it. Yeah. So we're not quite at breakthrough stage yet, but I think we can expect a lot more movement throughout the afternoon.
Yeah, and it's interesting in that all the unions were actually indicating that even though Steve Barclay was saying my door is always open, that when they got in that door, through that door, there were no substantive negotiations happening. That does seem to have changed.
That does seem to have changed, and that was definitely a problem that we were hearing from the unions. Pat Cullen and Steve Barclay, Pat Cullen, the chief of the RCN, the nurses union, and Steve Barclay's relationship seem to have gone very far south in recent months, but that does seem to have changed recently. Of course, the government was offering 3.5% previously and now gone up to and it's thought that the new offer will come with some extra conditions, some extra amendments to conditions, working conditions, and, for example, it sounds like the government is going to throw in an offer for career progress help for those workers. So there is certainly substantial movement from the government side. It's simply now a question of whether it can clear the hurdles of the union chiefs and then the members.
Indeed. Olivia, thank you very much indeed for that. Back to you at Euston, of course, as we hear any more developments as the afternoon develops. Thank you very much indeed. Back to that budget now, as we've been telling you, the Chancellor's pension tax break, removal of that lifetime limit. One of the headlines in yesterday's budget, Labour, though, saying it will reverse that decision, abolishing the lifetime pension allowance limit, to replace it with an NHS-only scheme, a move which could plunge the government's back-to-work drive into yet more problems, observers have said. Indeed, Sir Keir Starmer saying it would have been very easy for the Chancellor to have come up with a bespoke pension scheme to help retain NHS doctors. How easy would have that been? Let's speak to Sir Steve Webb, who is a former Minister of State for Pensions. Steve, thank you very much for your time. Has Sir Keir got a point that they could have had a sort of bespoke solution just for the NHS?
It's something that the BMA have been calling for a number of years. So the judges, as the example often cited, judges have their own what's called an unregistered pension scheme, which keeps them outside the tax net altogether. And the idea would have been that you have a top doctors scheme that could have been quite similar. And the government's argument today against that is, oh, well, that would take time and we haven't got time, we're in a hurry. Well, this problem has been known of for years. I mean, this is not the first time this issue of doctors retiring early because of pensions tax has come up. The government has been fobbing them off for years and years, and now suddenly is in a hurry to do something. And as a result, they've had to do something kind of quite blunderbuss, which benefits lots of people who, to put it bluntly, are not all brain surgeons.
Yeah, and of course, the other aspect, we thought maybe there was going to be the limit would go back up to 1.5, 1.8 million, which it used to be, of course, back, I think, about 2010. But they've just blown it apart completely.
That's right. I mean, it's the Treasury briefing out to journalists that the limit would go up to 1.8. So they were kind of almost laying a bit of a false trail so that then the Chancellor could really shock people on the day by saying, there's been some speculation of this, brackets, which we briefed out, but I'm going to go further than that. So there's a bit of a silly manipulation going on. But it is a simplification of the system. If you get rid of these complicated lifetime rules, it is a bit simpler. But it's a complete screeching U-turn on 10 years of cuts. You know, the lifetime allowance, as you said, has been coming down and down and down. And then yesterday, it goes up again, and then Labour may reintroduce it. So what pension savers are meant to do in terms of long-term planning is frankly beyond me.
Well, this is a very good point. I mean, I think it's been described as hokey-cokey. And as you say, obviously, we've got Rachel Reeves now, the Shadow Chancellor, saying, well, no, we're going to go back to, limiting it all. And, questions then, what happens? We were getting, 25% of a pensions fund that you could take tax-free, which is something I think Gordon Brown introduced. What happens to that? Is that still in place? Is that going to change as well?
So on that specific question, the government said, well, hang on a minute, we've got to be careful here. If we let people have unlimited pension pots, 25% of that could get very, very big. So They've retained a cap. Yeah, they've retained a cap on tax-free cash, and it's set at 25% of the current limit. So you won't be able to get more than just over £260,000 in tax-free cash, and that figure will probably stay the same. So they've capped that bit. The interesting question, I think, is if people think that a future government will change the rules, will we see a kind of gold rush between now and then? Will people up to their annual limits shovel as much money as they can, use all their past allowances, build it up as fast as they can, and then essentially the day before an election cash it all out before the tax charges come back again? And that would be kind of chaos, really, and the opposite of sensible financial planning.
Or indeed cash it out before the stock exchange takes another dive, which is another sort of question. However, the other aspect then was the state pension. We were getting indications, perhaps we get another indication on the state pension age being elongated yet again. We didn't get that.
No, there's a deadline of May for the publication of the review document and a decision. My sense is that they may well punt that into the long grass. They don't have to make a decision. They have to publish the report and announce the results of that. But they could say, COVID, we're not sure how long people are living these days. We don't have the data. We'll look at it again in 2 years' time, i.e. after the election. I think to decide now they were going to go really tough on pension ages in the run-up to an election, again, the opposition could just say, well, we wouldn't. And, you fragment off another portion of the electorate. So my hunch is that when they do announce a decision on this in probably 6 to 8 weeks, it will be a bit of a fudge, would be my guess.
Last question. If you were still pensions minister, would you have handled it this way?
Because you have the Treasury doing tax, you have DWP doing pensions. It needs to be looked at long term and ideally with stability, not, every budget a guessing game as to whether it's all going to go up, down, in or out.
Shake it all about. On that note, Sir Steve, thank you very much indeed for joining us once more on GB News. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And the pensions hokey-cokey. Well, coming up after the break, the latest on the strikes hokey-cokey and how it's hitting you. But let's get an update on the weather, see what that's up to.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A mild night to come for most of us. Largely cloudy, however, with some further rain or showers in many spots. We've got a couple of weather fronts clearing through. One cold front pushing through central areas during the evening. That's going to slow down as it approaches the southeast. And another lingering front across the north of Scotland, pepping up for a time to bring some thicker cloud and longer spells of rain for Orkney, Shetland, and into the far north of Caithness, Sutherland and Lewis. Otherwise, a lot of showers at Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland seeing the heaviest downpours, perhaps even some rumbles of thunder out there. And here's the cold front across the Midlands into East Anglia and the south. Spells of rain coming and going through the night. With all that weather going on, of course, it's going to be a mild night. Temperatures at around 8 to 10 Celsius by dawn. One exception, low single figures in the far north of Scotland. And actually, it's going to stay dull and damp here through the day. A lot of low cloud for Caithness and Sutherland, perhaps Orkney and Lewis as well. Some drizzle. And temperatures lingering around the mid-single figures. Otherwise, brightening skies through the day. A lot of showers to come through Friday afternoon. But away from the showers, actually there will be some sunny spells and temperatures reaching 15 or 16 Celsius in a few of the warmer spots through the Midlands as well as eastern England. Further showers or longer spells of rain coming through on Friday night. A fair amount of wet weather out there, some heavier bursts of rain at times, and a lot of cloud. That cloud lowering to cover western hills. But with, again, a lot of cloud and rain affecting the UK, it's going to be a frost-free night with temperatures staying up at around 8 to 10 Celsius, mid-single figures in the north of Scotland. Now, we start off Saturday with those cloudy skies and some areas of rain or showers, especially in the north and the west. Then there are two areas of persistent rain, the far southeast as well as the far northwest of Scotland, before generally showers break out elsewhere across the UK. A drier day to come on Sunday.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Let's just update you on strikes, in particular the health. First of all, just learning that we are getting more indications that the 14 unions involved in talks on the health stoppages, nurses, ambulance workers, that there could well be an announcement on the NHS deal. A bonus, we're being told, likely in excess of £1,000 for this year, and a rise of close to 5% for the next financial year starting in April in a month's time. Negotiators, we're told, on both sides agreeing it's the best deal they can do, and we are expecting a statement on that in the coming hours. Olivia Utley updating us outside Unison there in Euston. More on that. But in terms of the rail strike, that's gone ahead again today, the latest stoppage by the RMT with the 14 rail companies. Let's get the latest now with the Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, who's been out and about at Liverpool Street Station. And you've also been speaking to some bloke called Mick Lynch this morning, Simon.
I have, yes. Good afternoon. From a very busy London Liverpool Street Station, it would perhaps surprise people that on a day when members of the RMT union are going on strike, that actually, if you want to go to lovely Clacton or Southend, or indeed on the main line from here to Colchester to Ipswich to Norwich, well, there's trains every hour, as there are to Stansted Airport. And although services started late and will finish early, around the country, there's possibly as many as 50% of trains running. Now, that's a really significant figure, because even though if you're on First Transpennine or on northern trains, you've probably got a pretty ropey service today. On other lines, I mean, you're in Newcastle, you want to go to London, there's trains every half hour. I even calculated that it would be possible just catching the first train at about 7:30 this morning from Plymouth, via London, via Edinburgh, and via Inverness. You could end up this evening in beautiful Tain on the Dornoch Firth in the far north of Scotland. That's not looking to me like a particularly effective strike. And I certainly got the sense when I was talking to Mick Lynch, General Secretary of the RMT union, that he is looking for a relatively quick result, a settlement. They did say that the current offer of 5% last year, 4% this year, contingent on very large number of changes to working conditions, was a dreadful offer, and they couldn't possibly accept it. But I don't think that the 14 train operators represented by the Rail Delivery Group, or indeed the ministers who ultimately will sign this off, will need to move particularly far to get an agreement. I hope I'm right about that, because here we are. By the time we have the rest of this round of strikes, it'll be into April. That will be the 11th month since these national strikes began.
Yeah, I think he was saying earlier, stuck in a deadlock. However, we reflect, obviously, that there is a deal being put in terms of the network rail position, the signallers and track staff and so on. And then Steve Montgomery from the Rail Delivery Group saying, you know, the RMT really should be putting these offers to the membership in terms of ballot to see what their reaction is, given, as you say, the passage of time now.
Well, most certainly, because the line from the Rail Delivery Group, train operators, is that, look, if you think it's such a rubbish offer, why don't you put it to your members in a referendum? If they reject it, overwhelmingly, then we'll take that as some sort of message. But at the moment, and I did tackle Mick Lynch on this, he said, look, we did a huge consultation. It's a very complex offer. We talked to 1,000 representatives. They all talked to their members, and they said, no, we don't like it. However, increasingly, particularly with the Network Rail deal going out to the people who work for the infrastructure provider, I hope you're keeping up, it's a very complex dispute, then I think pressure will mount and I'm expecting possibly in just a week from now to see something where the RMT says reluctantly, we're putting this to members and then we'll just see what happens. I got the strong sense that the RMT would really be comfortable if the strikes set for the 30th of March and the 1st of April don't go ahead, because frankly, it's just not looking very solid or very effective. And of course, members have lost thousands of pounds so far since these strikes began in midsummer last year.
Yeah, and clearly we have to talk about pay figures and percentages and so on, but we know that part of it was about conditions and in particular about having guards on trains rather than driver-only trains. Have we got an indication of where we are with those discussions?
Yeah, look, it was a really odd thing in December, start of December. They were moving towards a settlement. They thought they had an agreement. Suddenly, the government logged in, and we're going to extend driver-only operation to all train operators. And that, frankly, was something that everybody knew was going to be rejected out of hand within a couple of hours, and so it proved. Yeah. The government and the train operators then walked back from that. They said, we're not going to make it part of this, although long term, it is still our belief that drivers should control the operation of the doors. And on many of these trains, driver-only operation is a complete misnomer. There will be a member of train crew, sometimes more, on board those trains. But it is a very contentious issue. Mick Lynch this morning called it a red line that could not be crossed. Although, talking to the rail delivery group, they say, look, it's not part of the row we're having at the moment. So, yes, they are very unhappy about that and closing lots of ticket offices as well.
OK, Simon, thank you very much indeed. We'll let you get off to Clacton or Southend, whichever takes your fancy. Thank you very much indeed. So that's a very busy Liverpool street. Let's head to Birmingham New Street and join Jack Carson, who's there. Busy there as well at the moment, Jack?
Well, quite busy as we head towards more commuter times. Of course, very busy this morning with a lot of passengers trying to get on those 1 train per hour commuter trains that have been coming in and out of New Street Station here all day. As Simon was saying, in terms of the disruption, it's not anywhere near as much of the disruption that we've seen in the past with almost no trains running. There are still quite a few trains, especially on the main lines, that you can still go and travel far distances. So passengers here haven't really been seeing as much disruption as usual. But just picking up on the point, of course, that Simon was making on the rail delivery group, the Department for Transport also kind of agreeing with them, saying that we urge the RMT's executive to put that offer to their members for a democratic vote, like it has on 2 separate occasions for Network Rail, and let them have their say. But I've been speaking to people around Birmingham New Street Station today to find out what the feeling is like here on the ground.
It's affecting hard-working people. People want money. People want money to live in times that are hard. Cost of living, petrol, food, energy. They deserve money like everybody else wants a decent wage to survive.
They're very inconvenient for me who's got the train today, but I absolutely understand why people are fighting for what they believe in.
It's just an inconvenience to the whole public, isn't it? But I don't think the trains have been any good ever since they were privatised, so I don't think I've seen anything improved by privatising it whatsoever. We're paying through the nose for that service, and it's next to useless.
Well, of course, with Cheltenham Festival on as well, it's meant a lot of people have been trying to cram onto less trains to get to that as well. But here, the commuters are just finding alternative routes, as well as using the trains that are on today to get around.
Yeah, going on horseback, maybe taking a bit too far, though. Jack, for the moment, in New Street with a very interested onlooker there. Thank you very much indeed. More, of course, on the strikes, both in terms of the rail and the health service. More on the England squad for the Euro 2024 qualifiers. And the latest, too, on FIFA's re-election of a certain Gianni Infantino, controversial figure, a president for a 3rd term. First, though, headlines with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2:33. I'm Bethany Elsey with the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the impact of the government's new childcare subsidy on the labour market is highly uncertain. It's after the Chancellor announced children over 9 months would be entitled to 30 hours of free care a week. The independent group also said scrapping the pension's lifetime allowance was unlikely to play a big part in increasing the workforce, but warned it would be expensive. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to reverse the pension plans, saying it will only help the richest 1%.
The idea that £1 billion giveaway to the richest 1% was necessary just falls apart the moment it's examined. But it is about priorities. You know, the government has chosen not to prioritise those families that are really struggling. Energy bills, yes, of course, there's some cap on it, but they're still double what they were just a few months ago. And, you know, a lot of people are paying £2,000 more on their mortgage because of the mess that the government have made.
Commuters are facing another round of rail strikes today as members of the RMT union walk out in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Passengers are being warned to expect disruption as 3 in 5 services across the UK are cancelled. Further strike action is planned for the 30th of March and the 1st of April. And the Duchess of Sussex will give her lemon olive oil cake recipe to a charity cookbook. All proceeds from the World Central Kitchen Cookbook will support communities impacted by natural disasters and humanitarian crises. The book will also include a recipe from former First Lady Michelle Obama. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are. We don't
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live, where we can tell you that FIFA President Gianni Infantino has been re-elected for a 3rd term until 2027, defiantly telling his critics, "I love you all." But do they love him? Possibly not. Less joy amongst the delegates at the 73rd Congress in Rwanda, with complaints being raised about World Cup human rights abuses and migrant worker deaths too at Qatar, hosting the World Cup, of course. The Norwegian Football Association lodging an official request that FIFA clarify its human rights responsibilities and all the various issues relating to Qatar, as well as future tournaments. So let's get more with our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's been following this. Yet again, football and politics making uneasy bedfellows.
Yeah, and they're not going to be parties. We've had the Qatar World Cup. You think that's the end of it? That's the end of all the human rights controversy? No. The Norwegian FA said, as other human rights organisations have asked for clarification from FIFA that when it says that it's going to bring about positive change in Qatar because of the World Cup.
Yeah.
Well, let's see it then. What's happened? So if we wind back to last December, last November, FIFA said that it was going to introduce on the issue of migrant workers' rights a trade union, and it was going to introduce a compensation fund for families of those that either be stadiums for the tournament. The Norwegian FA wanted clarification on that. It was added to the agenda at Congress, which is the 73rd FIFA Congress today in Rwanda. It's a one-day event. They didn't actually talk about it, and the Norwegian FA didn't get to say anything about it. Instead, we had a video from the chair of FIFA's Human Rights Group, who said that they will conduct an assessment of what did and didn't change in Qatar, that they are best placed to make that assessment. And the head of the Norwegian FA, Elise Klaveness, is reported to have been happy with that outcome. So FIFA are going to investigate whether FIFA managed to change Qatar
Not
at
exactly
all.
an independent inquiry. Yeah.
Doesn't seem that way.
And of course, we reflect that a certain Gary Lineker made comments about the situation ahead of the coverage of the World Cup.
Yeah.
But I gather also, in terms of Rwanda and the whole aspect of football and politics, Infantino made a comment about the genocide that took place in Rwanda.
Yeah, so just to clear this up, at the start of the day, he started talking by saying, listen, prior to my election, initially in 2016, I came to Rwanda, came to a football tournament. An unnamed official said to him, we really love you, but we're not going to support you. Now, he then said that after visiting the Rwandan Genocide Memorial, he was inspired by the way the Rwandan people had bounced back from the genocide, where 800,000 people, Hutus and Tutsis, moderate Hutus and Tutsis, died. He said he was inspired to bounce back himself. And just to give you his exact words, because we're going to hear his response in just a minute, he said, who am I to give up? What this country has suffered and how this country came back is inspiring for the entire world, so I certainly couldn't give up because someone was telling me something. Now, he was asked to clarify those remarks, and this is what he said.
I find it really incredible that you can interpret what I say as making an association with one of the most terrible tragedies that happened in humanity in this country with anything that happened in my life. This country is so inspiring, sorry I speak, it is so inspiring for so many people on what has been done that when we come with our little problems, we should just, be a bit more humble about things. That's all that I said.
But people took his words at face value, that he was trying to compare his position in a football governing body with mass killings and what happened in terms of the genocide. Is that right, or am I missing a point?
Well, look, those are his words. What this country has suffered and how this country came back is inspiring for the entire world, so I certainly couldn't give up, that is, run to be FIFA president, because someone was telling me something. So it does seem like there's a gap. But, hey, he clarified. Maybe he was misunderstood at the time, but that's
and we reflect English is not his first language, of course.
Indeed. So, yeah, so there were a few other things as well. He confirmed that Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian Tourist Board, Visit Saudi Arabia, will not be signing any sort of sponsorship deal with the Women's World Cup. That had caused some controversy, given Saudi Arabia's...
In terms of human rights, in terms of
exactly.
women treated there.
Yeah, so they won't be involved in that, although he did say that he sees no problem with that kind of relationship in future, given that there's a $1 billion trade deal worth between Australia and Saudi Arabia.
And what about the bigger picture, the bigger question about... we've had such controversy at FIFA with other people at the head, Sepp Blatter, and we remember what happened there, about returning for a third term. I mean, are the critics saying, it should be like many other organisations, you have 1 or 2 terms and that's it, you have to move on?
Well, there is a 3-term limit, but potentially he could go beyond 2027 now. He was elected unopposed today. There were the German FA didn't vote for him. Some Scandinavian countries refused to get up to their seat and applaud when he was confirmed as having a 3rd term. He is said to be wanting to run on to 2031, but they'd have to change the rules at FIFA for that. So that would be interesting. And then, look, there's going to be lots of controversy and clearly I don't think the human right, the element of mixing politics and sport when it comes to FIFA is not going to go away, given what he said about potential future sponsorship deals with countries like Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is said to be thinking about bidding for the World Cup in 2030 as well, which would be controversial.
So maybe he's on a yellow, not a red card for the moment. We shall see.
I like that.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. And, of course, we'll reflect too a little later on the England squad for the 2024 Euro qualifiers. But let's now talk about the Queen Consort, who this week met a viral sensation set to become a Disney star. Her Majesty visiting Elmhurst Ballet School in Birmingham, marking their centenary, meeting a scholarship student who started a journey on the rainy streets of Nigeria. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker has more for us.
Springing back into action. Elmhurst Ballet School, now 100 years old, teaches the next generation of pirouetting performers. Their royal patron, the Queen Consort, was here this week celebrating the ballet school's centenary, a month late due to COVID.
She said to me there was absolutely no way that I wasn't coming, and she was really apologetic. She was like, I'm so sorry, but we absolutely were committed to coming. And I was like, well, you've shown that you are, because you're here.
Jessica Ward is the principal of Elmhurst and is grateful for Camilla's years of commitment.
Her Majesty is very supportive, and it's really about kind of advocating for the school, helping us build our school community, celebrate it. I think the other really beautiful thing about our relationship is she's really interested in the people.
Elmhurst students come from far and wide. Anthony Maidu from Nigeria became a viral sensation when a video of him dancing on the rainy streets of Lagos was watched more than 16 million times. His story's now being made into a Disney documentary, following Anthony's journey from Africa to winning an Elmhurst scholarship and pursuing a ballet career.
Hello.
The Queen Consort met Anthony, who wants to inspire other young people to pursue their dreams, whatever their background.
It was such an honour to meet her because loads of kids around the world don't have the same opportunity that I do. I just want to let them know that whatever they want to do, they should stick to it and never give up.
During the visit, the Queen Consort was entertained by students on the stage. Sophie Walters is from Australia and performed in 2 of the numbers.
People back home, they're really supportive of the royal family and the Commonwealth, obviously, and to tell them that I've performed on the other side of the world for Her Majesty, they'll just be blown away.
In a speech, the Queen Consort praised the skillful students and told them she herself was familiar with ballet shoes. Her Majesty revealed she'd joined Silver Swans classes for elderly ballet dancers. Camilla may not have performed on the stage, but it's not long until the global spotlight is on her and her husband, the King, when they are crowned in Westminster Abbey in less than 8 weeks' time. Cameron Walker, GB News, Birmingham.
Now, we were updating you on the situation as regards the NHS strike action. 14 unions have been at talks this afternoon. Negotiators on both sides apparently agreeing it's the best deal they can get to, so we may expect a statement on that in the coming hours. All NHS staff, except doctors involved in that. But we can also tell you that north of the border, NHS staff represented by the GMB union have narrowly accepted an improved pay offer by a majority of 59.7%. In terms of that offer, we're being told it equates to an average 6.5% increase for 23-24 for some 160,000 NHS staff, including nurses, midwives and paramedics, including a commitment to modernising Agenda for Change, which is now 20 years old, actually, in terms of retention and recruitment. So clearly moves both north and south of the border. We'll update you as we get more details. But let's update you now on this fire in West Sussex with a historic 400-year-old hotel housing Ukrainian refugees engulfed by fire. This was at Midhurst in the early hours of this morning. Thought to have broken out shortly after 1 a.m. It spread then to the Angel Inn next door, housing Ukrainian refugees, including many children. But thankfully, many were got out of those rooms quickly and all made safe. Our national reporter Theo Chicombo is still down in Midhurst for us. And Theo, just to reiterate, everyone got out safely and they are being looked after by local communities now.
They are indeed. The local community has been working together with the local council and other volunteers as well, been looking after the Ukrainians who are staying in this building. Just on my right shoulder, as you may be able to see, there's a cloud of smoke fire brigade have been here for pretty much most of the day, since the early hours of this morning and throughout the day. We do understand they are likely to be here for the next few days and ensuring that this area is safe as well. There are some concerns that the building may collapse following this fire, so that is something they are looking into as well. And today people have been coming here just to see what's been happening. And of course I also spoke to Ruben, who is a manager at a restaurant on this road. He was here in the early hours of this morning. After he finished his shift, he saw some smoke and he came towards this way and he helped some of those families who were in there, including their young children. This is what he had to say.
I just finished work about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and one of my colleagues see the smoke, a lot of smoke coming up from the town, and he just said to me, there's a fire on the town. So I just called 999 straight away, and they said they got the news, and by the time I came, I see the fire engine came up, and that all you can see on my video is fire and everything. So there's some Ukraine refugee, about 34 people, which is they are safe, yeah, and well, so. Yeah, I offered them on the cold weather. They were outside, and I offered them to come to the restaurant and sit down here. So they came with me, and they sit down. They have drinks, tea, coffee, and I gave them a blanket and everything.
So just over my left shoulder, you might be able to see the cloud of smoke. So this is one of the main high streets. People use this road to go to Chichester, to London and the surrounding villages. And now, because this road has been blocked, a lot of people are finding themselves stuck in traffic. But investigations are going to continue here. The police who work in this area haven't said what the cause of this is at the moment, but they are speaking to residents and of course people who work and live in this area to establish what has happened. But for now, investigations are continuing and the fire brigade are still here in full force. They've been working on shift, many of them, to extinguish this fire which has affected this 400-year-old building and those which are around it as well.
Yes, a lovely historic coaching in. Thankfully, everyone's safe, but of course now questions as to whether that, as you said, will collapse, and trying to keep things safe. Thea, for the moment in Midhurst, thank you very much indeed. Now, space aficionados having a bit of a mixed day today. Not quite to infinity and beyond, but certainly maybe to Cornwall and beyond. Elon Musk's SpaceX, first of all, completing a successful refuelling mission in the early hours. But less positive news, Virgin Orbit announcing it is set to pause operations. Almost all the employees at the satellite launch company down in Cornwall at Newquay reportedly being furloughed without pay. Well, this follows the company's failure to launch the first ever satellite mission from UK soil back in January. And meanwhile, NASA revealing its new spacesuit for the planned Artemis moon landing. The outfit's replacing the white puffy suits that we saw with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and all those Apollo astronauts. Now more streamlined and flexible and a better fit for women because, yes, we've got female astronauts for the Artemis moon launches. Well, let's get now the latest with Dr. Maggie Liu, astrophysicist at the University of Nottingham. Maggie, thank you for joining us. First of all, what are we learning about what's been going on, not going on, rather, at Newquay with our own space operation there?
So we've just learned that there has been a huge number of furloughed staff at Virgin Orbit, which is kind of a branch of the larger Virgin company that we know. Like you said, earlier this year, they had this failed launch, and a lot of people were riding on that this was going to happen. I mean, they had a lot of bad luck with COVID, delaying things. They had a few hiccups, and they were really relying on this launch going ahead. There were several missions, several small satellites to be launched, and obviously it didn't go to plan. And now, I guess it's very sad that this has happened, but it's not it's not really that big of a surprise.
Well, yeah,
this is going to be.
Just to explain to people, we're seeing some pictures of the SpaceX launch, which has worked. Obviously, down in Newquay, they were launching the rocket from the back of a jumbo jet, which seems to be a bit of a Heath Robinson affair. Is it the case that, you know, we are a bit behind the curve in terms of the international space race for satellites?
Well, SpaceX was launched. That their launch yesterday was on a Falcon 9 rocket. It's very different from this kind of commercial airplane that we're more familiar with. And this would have been a huge game changer for the space industry. It would have mean much cheaper space flights and more affordable launches to do more science in the future. And with the loss of, if this goes badly for Virgin Orbit, then we'll have less companies offering these kind of small services to get payloads into space, which means reduced competition and higher prices for customers.
And this is obviously the point. It is now obviously a commercial concern for Virgin Orbit and for SpaceX as well, unlike the old days when we had NASA just funneling state money into space.
Absolutely. And even like ESA, we're planning to have a Ariane 6 rocket, and that's been delayed for quite a while. And their space mission Euclid will be launched on a SpaceX rocket instead, because Ariane 6 is just not ready to go.
OK, but we've got the big one, of course, in terms of back to the moon with Artemis, and we've got the new spacesuits, the new moon suits that have been unveiled, and not a sliver of silver or white, it's blue and orange.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this is going to be the absolute final colour. I think they're hiding some bits that are priority for now. Yeah, that's the main design of the suit. You can see it's a lot more slimmed down, which will allow the astronauts to have a lot more flexibility, which is really important because designing a spacesuit is actually much harder than designing a space rocket. It's essentially a condensed space rocket. It's keeping the astronauts themselves alive. It's got all of their life support systems, waste removal, oxygen, temperature, pressure, everything condensed into one. And they have to be mobile and light. So
and having a comfort stop as well, without being too graphic about it, of course, which may have to sort of limit the fashion aspect of it. But clearly, things are moving ahead, at least on Artemis, with the spacesuit. Maggie, thank you very much indeed for your time. And, of course, we'll see what happens down at Newquay with the British space operation. Thank you very much indeed. So, back down to earth with a bump, because that's it from us for the moment. We're back down with you at 12, but stay with us. Stephen Dixon with you this afternoon, you lucky people, with yet more reaction, of course, to the budget.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. A mild night to come for most of us. Largely cloudy, however, with some further rain or showers in many spots. We've got a couple of weather fronts clearing through. One cold front pushing through central areas during the evening. That's going to slow down as it approaches the southeast. And another lingering front across the north of Scotland, pepping up for a time to bring some thicker cloud and longer spells of rain for Orkney, Shetland, and into the far north of Caithness, Sutherland and Lewis. Otherwise, a lot of showers at Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland seeing the heaviest downpours, perhaps even some rumbles of thunder out there. And here's the cold front across the Midlands into East Anglia and the south. Spells of rain coming and going through the night. With all that weather going on, of course, it's going to be a mild night. Temperatures at around 8 to 10 Celsius by dawn. One exception, low single figures in the far north of Scotland. And actually, it's going to stay dull and damp here through the day. A lot of low cloud for Caithness and Sutherland, perhaps Orkney and Lewis as well. Some drizzle and temperatures lingering around the mid-single figures. Otherwise, brightening skies through the day. A lot of showers to come through Friday afternoon. But away from the showers, actually, there will be some sunny spells and temperatures reaching 15 or 16 Celsius in a few of the warmer spots through the Midlands as well as eastern England. Further showers or longer spells of rain coming through on Friday night. A fair amount of wet weather out there, some heavier bursts of rain at times, and a lot of cloud, that cloud lowering to cover western hills. But with, again,